What's up, everybody? It's time for a new episode of Allcraft. And wait, how do you guys feel about me starting off with a bald joke?
I mean, I don't know. You got like 3 years left, Rich.
Yeah.
That's
I was
true.
gonna say that once again, this episode, if you're just tuning in right now and you've never seen the show before, I assure you that this isn't from left to right.
Yeah.
A podcast about the progression of male pattern baldness. No, it's not. This is actually a show about World of Warcraft, and very lucky for us, we have Sloot on, who has kind of been the king of Torghast in a lot of ways, and also recently got to talk to Ion, and that interview, Sloot, was absolutely incredible. I definitely want to talk about that a little bit, but I think probably the first place that we should start off is just, how have you been liking the alpha?
Oh, it's been good. It's I don't know, it's fun. It's alpha. Like, there's not much to do, right? Like, you just go through the content in 2-3 hours, unless you're doing crazy stuff like getting killed by GMs.
Yeah, it's fun.
The zones are great though, and it's fairly polished compared to like BFA Alpha, from what I remember, and like Legion Alpha. But it's been good so far.
I agree a lot.
Yeah, I like that they're dropping like weekly content and stuff. So far so good. Let's put it that way.
I think that the way that they've actually tried to integrate, and Rich, I think you're getting a little bit of feedback too. With your mic.
It might be Ted.
I'm not sure. Let's see. Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. I hear it very vaguely, so I'm not sure what it is.
I see Ted's thing lighten up a little bit.
But
I'm not sure why.
Let me see 1 second.
Okay.
I mean, I can mess around with my settings too if it's me. It might be because I'm using like streaming PC, because that's where the cams are linked.
So
it could be double dipping audio from my gaming PC.
I will say though, I've been enjoying watching both of you run through Torghast. Last night, I like went in, and I feel like this is kind of the thing that keeps happening with Torghast for me. I went in and I was like, oh, I'm gonna do a quick one really quick, and then you start getting on a roll, and all of a sudden you're in Torghast for like 6 hours.
It's like if you sit through the first 3 levels and you have to deal with that bullshit, you're gonna try to take it all the way. Like, that's the way I look at it. Is like, if I have to go through all that, I'm definitely gonna do that. I'm definitely gonna go as far as I can. Yeah, we're trying to fix the echo, guys. Suits just got to change around some settings.
Yeah, it might be on my end. Let's see here.
Okay.
Might need to do some like hack going on the other computer thing and set up a cam there.
If you want, you can just put on push to talk if that'd be easier.
Sure, but I think when I talk, it like doubles your guys' audio.
Oh, does it really?
I think that's what's happening.
Okay.
Sick.
An incredible World of Warcraft player and a hacker, guys.
Yeah,
and a fucking hacker.
Yo, let's see. Am I still getting? Yeah, I'm still getting it.
Okay. I'll tell you what. You guys talk for like seconds, and I'm just gonna literally swap the camera to my gaming PC, and then that should all be set up there.
Sounds good, man. Thanks.
Cool. We'll just talk about you while you're setting everything up.
That's good.
So, as most of you guys already know, Sloot had a really good interview that went down. I guess it was 2 weeks ago with Ion. So we're gonna probably start off by talking about a lot of the things that went on there. Talk about everything that's going on with the alpha as well. And talk about the different zones that we have, whether it be Revendreth and what we saw in Bastion. I feel like Revendreth
saw a little bit of Maldraxxus too.
Is that what? So I actually only saw you die. So what did you actually do?
So basically what we did is we went over to Maldraxxus, and we ended up basically, like, I was able to continuously do the Farsight all the way, or not Farsight, Eagle Eye all the way up to the top, and then I was able to get over the walls and actually see some of the mobs that are down below. And I found a boss. I straight up found a boss inside of Maldraxxus, and plenty of other stuff too. And like, we also went underneath the maw, and we spent like hours underneath there just looking at all the different assets and everything they had, and it was really, really cool.
I've been looking at
we found Draka, which is Thrall's mother.
Quite a few of the assets as well. I've been enjoying the furry drawn eyes quite a bit.
Yeah,
I'm very excited for those to come out. I'm kind of curious. This is like a thing I didn't want to talk about necessarily on the show proper, but I'm curious how you feel about it. and since we have a little bit of time here, Sloot's figuring out his audio thing. How do you feel about the potential of allied races coming from the Covenants?
So if you did the entire Covenant quest line, and imagine they put it in like 9.2, and you did the whole Covenant quest line, and you were able to recruit that Covenant race as an allied race in the same way like pandas can be Horde and Alliance, kind of like that.
Yeah. Like I know that there was a lot of talk that like every single one of the Covenants might become an allied race.
I think allied races are a really good way for Blizzard to print $25 bills. So I would say that they'll probably do something like that. And also, like, the players like seeing it. I mean, like, having the new allied races is a good thing. It's not like, oh, wow, you know, Blizzard's just doing this for money. This is something that a lot of players like to see, and they enjoy it. So I don't think it's a bad thing either if they want to do this too. So I'd be a big fan of that. Okay, dude. Okay. Dude.
I'm kind of I don't really want them to be allied races.
Why is that?
I'm gonna be completely honest. I don't know. There's something about it that just does not make sense to me. If all of a sudden you go to the realm of death, right? We're literally dead in this next expansion.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, if all the dead people can come back, that means that there's no stakes in WoW, right? Like everybody can just be dead all the time.
Well,
And
that's
I feel like just.
yeah.
I feel like just adding furry Draenei, like I'm fine with allied races.
Right.
Like I'm fine with allied races. I think that it worked really well in BFA for what it is, regardless of whether it's something that makes the company a lot of money or it's just a gameplay feature. I feel like it did feel right in BFA, and I feel like it's. I would love for Tuskars maybe to be an allied race, right? They're cool.
Tuskars.
I like Tuskars. Yeah, I feel like Tuskars would be a good allied race. Makes a lot of sense. Blubbery boys.
But you know what? I think they'd be good. They'd be basically just like pandas. You'd almost use the panda models for Tuskars. It'd be the same thing. Yeah, that'd be awesome. I like that a lot.
Hosen are good ones.
The monkey
You like
guys
you like
in like the
them
Jade
Hosen?
Forest.
Yeah, imagine that with the set of gear.
I don't know. I think they're so weird, dude. They're just like crawling around. It's awkward. You know what I mean? It's just awkward.
They could carry a sword with their tail. Imagine if Hosen warriors carried a sword with their tail. That'd be pretty cool. But I feel like just using... I feel like if you use every single race that's introduced in the game every single time, it might lose its luster.
Yeah.
And then it might just be oversaturated like mounts are oversaturated now.
So you just
know
have
what I
too
mean?
many races in the game. People don't even really know what to expect from each one of them.
Yeah, and then you just stop even going for them at a certain point. And I don't know. I do feel like if you saturate it too much, it does make stuff... It makes stuff feel like a little bit less... Like, when I see a Mechanome right now, I genuinely get angry. I hate... They're so
Because they look like shit.
They're awful.
Like,
and I'm worried about more Mechanomes, basically.
Hello.
Hey, testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Seems like it's good. All right, great. Now we're actually working.
Sorry about that, fellas.
No problem.
Nah, it's
man.
totally fine. Question, Ted. Out of all the do you think the furry Draenei are good looking?
No.
Okay, now that we have that settled, we can move on to the hard-hitting questions. I want to start off by talking about the zones a little bit more. That's what we were talking about as you actually, when you're figuring out the stuff with your mic. I feel like Rivendreth has been absolutely fantastic. I feel like everybody's been pretty into that zone. Does it feel a lot different to you, Sloot, than zones that we saw, whether it be in BFA and Legion?
Man, I mean, kind of like all of us here, I've been playing this game for so long, like since vanilla, and I've never, like, you know, usually our team carries, blah, 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 and you start a new expansion, and you're like, oh, yes, this zone obviously looks pretty good, and whatever. But this one, just, like, the more you do it, it just kind of, like, just blows you away. Like, I've never seen a zone level design in WoW like this. It was just super. I mean, you know, Zach, like, you should know, you're a pro Dark Souls player, but, like, it's very Dark Soulsy, and it's got a lot
Bloodborne.
of...
It looks exactly like Bloodborne.
Insane.
It reminded me a lot
like,
of the Castlevania series on Netflix. I remember like a lot of the same aesthetics. It's the exact same thing, and I love that. Like the whole like Count Dracula, like Transylvanian aesthetic, and all of that stuff is really really cool. And it's also like, I don't know, like the way that you were saying, Ted, with basically having the it's like you see a new zone and it's like, okay, this is kind of like X or Y. At least that's the first thing that I see whenever I see a zone. I just compare it to another zone. With Rivendreth, it's really hard to do that. And I think that's impressive in itself.
Man, have you, I took a while, like I do the same thing you do. I love running around exploring and just like every inch of the map, and the amount of just vertical in the level, like Z-axis, just different balconies is just insane. It's actually such a huge zone because there's just so many ways to go up and down.
Yeah.
It's one of those things too where I usually think that I think that there were actually some verticality issues. There were some verticality issues in not in Rivendreth, but in BFA in general, where it kind of made the zone not feel real. It didn't feel like it flowed. It felt like a little bit contrived. And when you get into Rivendreth, it feels very real. It feels very alive. Tips actually had a tweet, which I completely disagree with, like a million percent.
Talked about the same exact tweet. Go ahead.
Oh my God. The tweet could not be more wrong about Rivendreth. I think the tweet brings up some good points, though. I think Tips is really good at playing the devil's avocado, if you will. It definitely seems like some sort of vegetable or plant was maybe consumed before he made that tweet, but I won't go into that. The idea to his tweet, though, was...
I can pull it up right here. Let's see.
Yeah,
we have production quality now. Just give me a second. Can I get this to work?
I believe.
Somehow I did. I don't know how, but somehow it actually did work. So yeah, there it is. Rivendreth is awesome, but whatever happened to creating sprawling open zones? Look at Mulgar, for example, no extra clutter, invasive foliage, or camera breaking objects. Rivendreth, like most WoW zones, is beautiful, but feels like a game map. Mulgar feels like a real place. I feel like that's partially true, but I think the best comparison with Mulgar and Rivendreth is it's not really very good. But if you compare Rivendreth with Suramar, it makes a lot of sense because there are sprawling, bustling cities inside these different places, and it makes sense.
I think that the tweet, if I was looking at some of the BFA zones, I kind of would have agreed, right? That
yeah, I do too.
I think overall though, zones have definitely progressed a lot, and the game design's a lot. I mean, the zone design, as far as a gameplay perspective, has been elevated over the years a whole bunch. Whether or not you like Classic, you can look at some things with zone design in Modern WoW and just go, okay, like this is fantastic and a lot better. And they've gotten better at making the game over the years in quite a few ways. But when you go into Rivendreth and Sloot, kind of like you were saying, I feel like it feels so unique compared to every other zone. It has all of these things that sometimes I feel like haven't worked, like with verticality. The quests themselves make you move around and want to explore. The theme is strong, but it's not overbearing.
Compare the verticality of Nazjatar with Rivendreth, because I would say that Nazjatar is probably the most recent zone that we've had that's really annoying to navigate. But Rivendreth, and also it's like playtesting it on the alpha will be different than playing it in terms of efficiency on the live game. But I do think that Rivendreth makes a lot more sense because the zone is supposed to be a large Transylvanian Dracula-like city. And that just, it just fits together that way. It's like if you didn't have verticality, if you didn't have, all that intricacy, it just wouldn't fit with the theme. So I think that the main thing, you can compare a zone like Bastion, and with what Tip said, I think Bastion fits that very well. Bastion is a very wide open zone. There's not a lot of stuff going on, and there are tons of completely open areas, and that's good.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean that's just it. And I think the important thing is to have zone variation, right? You can't have every zone, like Tips is saying, you can't have every zone be like Revendreth. That's just way too much.
Yeah.
Man, Rich, you trying to blow everyone's eardrums out. So I think that's really just the main important thing. I turned it off on my end too, so that was a double whammy. But that's just, I don't know. It's good so far. We'll see how Maldraxxus and Ardenweald are. I think Ardenweald's kind of been spotted already with, I think Zach, you did it too with the Farsight from Shaman. Yeah, I did it too. And it's looking pretty bumping. But I don't know, man. So far so good for the zones.
It's good to be excited about the game. I know that for BFA, I went into it, I was excited for it because it was a WoW expansion, but I wasn't excited for it because it was BFA. And with Shadowlands, I'm excited for it because it's Shadowlands. And that's certainly a big change in terms of my perspective on the expansion. And it's I think that we're due, everybody has always the meme of the A team and the B team for WoW. And you have a good expansion and a bad expansion back and forth. And so, if the rule continues repeating, then I think we're due for a good one.
I actually, there were people yesterday talking about, they're like, yeah, this one looks pretty good, so I think we're going to take the next one off. That was the thing that made me so happy, that they were so confident that this is going to be good, that they're already talking about the next expansion and how good that's going to be. I do feel like there are a lot of positive things. Sloot, I do want to ask you, because I know that you went through and you did a bang on each spec. And so you have a decent amount of insight. I'm assuming you didn't get to fully do it on Rivendreth yet, but I know that you did it with the Kyrian abilities. How are you feeling about some of the new Covenant abilities that are actually added to classes?
Yeah. Most of them are cool, but the problem is some of them are so good that it highlights like the dumpster ones really badly.
Yeah.
And I'm not like, and I don't know if their end game is to make it so that I don't know if their end game is to make it so that some of them are so bad that you're kind of forced to a Covenant kind of thing. Like the rogue one's so bad. The priest one's like so bad because it's 3-minute CDs, but then the warrior one, like I'm sure you saw as well, Zach. Actually,
The
it's
Kyrian
so
Spear.
Good. Yeah,
oh,
it's
dude,
so
it's
good.
insane.
Yeah, it's just like the damage is so high. But so I don't know. Like we'll see the Revendreth ones coming up too. But man, I mean, that's still one of the hot topics, right? Like balancing that shit. But if they're gonna get it right, then they get it right. But at least we have the fallback that they said that if they don't nail it, then screw it. Just like spec whatever you want, kind of thing.
I think they've been really open with the development, and I think also like they've been much more, I guess, like cooperative and treated the development as like a process between the players and the devs more so like this time around versus BFA. And it seems like the Covenant. Like the abilities in the Covenants, I'm pretty sure you guys probably agree, maybe not. But like, I don't like the idea of tying player power to the Covenants. I think it's just going to kind of force people and pigeonhole people into just doing one and then creating a bunch of other problems that come out of that. But I did like Ian's explanation of why they wanted to at least try and do it. And so I'll be curious to see what they actually come up with.
I don't think they'll ultimately pull it off, right? Because we all know the only way to fully balance this game is to homogenize everything, and they're not going to do that. So there's always going to be something that's just a bit better, even if it's not just one of those 1% like min-max sim things. I think there's just always going to be something that's just mechanically better in some way or globally better for whatever the expansion might entail. And, the best thing is going to be, right, in like 9.1 or 9.2.
The rebalancing.
But they're going to launch a new zone, and that new zone's going to have a new Covenant.
Wait,
and
really?
Everybody's going to want to. No, I'm just like saying.
Oh,
this is a joke.
I was about to say.
But it's probably going to happen.
It could happen, right?
It could happen.
Especially with the, I mean, not to go too deep into the lore, because I have been. I've actually, this expansion's made me care about lore again, which is wild. I feel like the last time I cared this much about lore was when the book actually came out, which I'm actually pretty sure I tried to talk to Ted about like a whole bunch, because that was back during like MDI stuff. I was like,
right.
Do you actually know the story about how the pandas became? But that's neither here nor there. I've been very excited about it, but there is the potential for an extra Covenant because of everything that's going on with Sylvanas, stuff that's going on with the jailer. Like, there is potential that we could see another one, which I do think is a relatively interesting thing all in all. But I was so blown away when I went into Rivendreth and then I used the Warlock ability for the first time, and it's just like this giant anime ball that actually curses everything as well. It feels super good. It puts a dot on things, feels very Warlock. I loved it. And the Scouring Tithe felt like absolute dog shit. So it did feel really good. It's something that I would want to play because of how good it feels. But like Sloot said, homogenizing something would be the only way to balance it. And I like the fact that some of these abilities feel so cool and you want to play them. And I would be a little bit bummed if I couldn't actually make a huge decision to go for a certain Covenant because I like how it feels. Like, after being in Rivendreth, I want to be an edgelord and play that Covenant.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean? Which I feel like is
it makes you want to
decision.
wear all black in real life.
Dude, the Covenant decision, even just as cosmetic, I think they've already delivered their goal. Even without the power of it, just as a cosmetic thing, I think they've completely already delivered their goal. This is one of the biggest decisions I feel like I've made in WoW in a very long time, which is, already color me wrong. The power game behind it is definitely what scares me, because when you do talk about some of those abilities, the Warrior Spear, for example, that Sloot mentioned, the Kyrian one, that is basically it shackles everything together. It's going to be insane in dungeons. The damage is crazy. That is such a powerful ability. I'm so happy that Warriors are getting it. It is so cool that I want to play Warrior. I have class envy. I literally have class envy because of it. So I definitely don't want to see those things get overbalanced. But speaking of balance, let's talk about Torghast for a little bit, Sloot, because I was watching you do stuff in Torghast before like anybody else had the idea. Then people started copying everything that you were doing. And like I'm pretty sure you were like the first person to kill Torghast or whatever the heck his name is. I saw you do a whole bunch of that stuff. What's your overall opinion right now of the tower?
I mean, I'm a big fan of roguelikes, right? So I'm always kind of partial to that stuff. So I'm really excited for it, and I think it could be a really good feature. But there's I mean, they've missed the mark with a lot of tuning, so they need to fix that up and to make it more fun. Because right now, what happens is the most fun is playing heroic for the first 5 to 10 floors when it's actually hard. You got to CC properly, you got to play properly, you got to learn the abilities. What do I need to interrupt? What can I eat to the face because it doesn't hit so hard? Blah blah blah. And then it's fun. He starts synergizing a build based on what drops. I'm like, oh, crazy frostbolt damage, whatever it may be. But then once you get to like mid 30s ish, it just becomes snooze fest, right? Because you outclass everything, and at that point, you're just adding some more frostbolt damage and some more mastery and some more haste. And it's like fun to see the numbers the first couple of times, but the novelty wears off very quickly.
It's like playing playing like GTA with the cheat codes on.
Right.
That was the comparison I made.
The point of a roguelike is it is like to make sure that you get these crazy like OP builds, but those OP builds should be required to some level of synergy to get to the later floors. Like mobs should be tuned expecting that you're going to be insanely powered. So whereas right now it's just like they barely scale.
Let me ask you a question. Would you like to see the buffs tuned down or the mobs tuned up? Probably a bit of both, but like which direction would you like to see them go in?
Definitely the mobs tuned up because that's the heart of a roguelike. Yeah, right. Like I know people are like, this is so unbalanced and stuff, but that's literally the point, right? Like that's how a roguelike works. I don't know if you've played one of those games like Gungeon or like Isaac or anything. That's just the point of the game. The point is to go just ridiculous and things that you wouldn't find in the real game, not to try and balance it like an M+ dungeon or something. So it's definitely the mobs are what's lacking, but there are some outstanding builds that are just a bit, like
I actually like kind of wrote up a little thing about it, just like with what I was thinking, and I'm actually really excited to talk to you about this, Sloot, because I know you've played a lot of these games as well. Zach hasn't really gotten to play as many of the roguelikes.
I definitely should, Zach, man. It's good stuff.
I want to play them just so I can see what the influence on Torghast was. And
I made a list for you.
Yeah,
I made like a full list.
I've enjoyed it so much. I want to see what what is Binding of Isaac? What is Risk of Rain? What are these games? And
Dead Cells is a good one too. There's so many.
Hades is a good one too.
Dude, Hades is actually I'm just getting into Hades. I hadn't really played it before Torghast came out yet. But I actually want to bring up Dead Cells because I feel like it's one of the ones that a lot of people have played a lot, and I feel like it's really easy to kind of paint this idea. And I'm curious how you feel about it. When you play Dead Cells, for anybody who hasn't played that game, it's somewhat of a platformer. You're getting weapons and gear, and also as you move through, the way that you're really getting overpowered is you're kind of going one of 3 different talent trees, right? You're either going, I believe it's called tactics, brutality, or survival. So you're actually getting levels in that, which increases your damage with weapons that use that spec, and you're getting health based off of that as well. So you're making these active decisions which actually create certain builds. So there are brutality builds that are focused on doing crazy combos with melee damage. There are survival builds which just throw down a bunch of different traps, or tactic builds that throw down a bunch of different traps, survival builds that use shields. And a lot of the power gain that you have and a lot of those broken things that happen are actually based off of player decision and going for certain builds and the knowledge that comes with how different abilities interact with each other. I feel like right now, the anime that you actually get in Torghast has very little synergy in some places. There are some builds that do exist, but I would like to see one of the things that happens in Torghast is actually create synergy between those animes. Create
so like building the way towards I-beam, like just make your I-beam ridiculously powerful with no cooldown that makes you immune to damage.
Or sigils. I mean, the thing is like immune to damage, I'm a little bit scared of because, like Sloot mentioned, you get in these scenarios where it's just like...
Well, one of them makes you immune to damage, by the way. Like, that's why I come up with that one. But
there's an IB one that makes you immune to damage, and then spell devastation if you're in your tank form, right? Mm-hmm. And then like those are... I actually haven't ever gotten it to the point where I'm just like able to completely spam it, and there is some interesting play around with those. But I do feel like when I play a Demon Hunter, I know what's going to happen on the Demon Hunter. I'm eventually going to hit the point where I end up just having so much versatility, so much mastery that I'm going to be able to one-shot something, even if I don't get the interesting abilities. If I play my Warlock, whatever my main demon is, I'm going to be able to, every time I summon it, summon 6, and they're going to give me additional stats. When I'm a mage, I'm eventually going to get the blink talents. Is really like there aren't necessarily things to build towards. Obviously, it's very early. How would you feel about having builds that exist within all of the different anime abilities, Ted?
Yeah, no, like I agree. I have like three major complaints about Torghast or hope for improvements, and that's definitely one of them. Because one of the main things, Zach, like because you don't know with these roguelike games is to increase replayability so that it doesn't turn within a month like, oh, I just got to do my weekly Torghast kind of thing.
Yeah.
You need to have build variation, and you need to be able to have like random things drop from your enemas and then just be able to combine them in different ways. So, oh, this run was a Frostbolt run, this run was an Invis run, this run was a, and they need to have these different builds.
Even if you go into it wanting to make it, let's say, a Frostbolt run, you think that they should kind of trend towards, like, you can do Frostbolt, but something else is just going to be a little bit stronger if you play into it, just to kind of not really force, but heavily influence what people choose.
Yeah, like you'll have like
agree with you.
You'll have like S tier builds, you'll have like A tier builds, but it's up to you as the player to know these synergies and play and just play your luck of the hand kind of thing. Like, oh, I'm just not getting the usual Frostbolt build or whatever, but I'm getting some really good like Frozen Ore build or whatever.
It reminds me a lot of drafting. I used to draft a lot in Magic the Gathering. I don't know if you guys have ever done that. I know Rich has before, and it's like sometimes if you'd want to draft red and you just weren't getting red cards, you had to change what you were going to do. And it made each draft unique and different, and that's what really made it fun for me. So I'd actually really like to see that happen.
Yeah, and the thing is like you can try to force it, but if you do, you're probably going to get booty blasted, right? And that's one of the things with roguelikes. It's being agile, and it makes every run feel unique. And what happens when you don't... You might end up creating something that you didn't know that you could create, which is then really fun. Or you finish that run and you go, yeah, I did a good job with the thing I didn't want to do, but I really want to try that Frostbolt build, and then you go again. And that's one of the big joys of roguelikes. I would like to see that a lot as well. Ted, there's one thing in particular that I'm actually curious about how you feel, because I personally hate it right now, and I might just be malding unnatural power stacking up.
That comb over Rich, I don't know, man.
I got 3 years left, Ted. Let me enjoy my 3 years left, dude. Wait, you think you have more years than me left? Did you just say
I said
I get
you have 3. I said I have 1.
Oh, okay. I was like,
fuck
you, bro.
No.
Look into your future, boys.
That's pretty much. It's about right.
Allcraft season 8. All of us are gonna be balding.
God, dude. Oh no. What were you saying, Rich, about the
go ahead.
Yeah, what was the thing?
The only thing I hate more than my hairline is unnatural power. Right
what is
now.
unnatural power? What is that?
Elites stack up a buff over time, and when they get to 10 stacks, they're immune to CC kicks and like all of this crap. And I feel like sometimes when obviously the balance is weird when you're starting out on floor 25 with no anime, but it just basically says if you don't have enough damage at a certain point, this might just become unbearable. I'm not a huge fan of that right now. I'm curious how you feel, Sloot.
I don't know, man. Like it kind of needs to happen, because what you're gonna have then is if they don't have. So it's a stacking buff, 10% damage and 10% movement speed. Once it hits 10 stacks, immune to all forms of CC and interrupts.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a DPS race to make sure that you're not just that random frost mage that kites it throughout the entire level for 4 hours to kill one boss, right? Because then they are going to need to do what nobody wants right now, which is start to make like they're going to need to start putting in like insanity run timer style thing. And like I understood what they said about timers in Towley's interview. Like it makes sense, right? If you're reaching those extreme floors and you're literally just sitting there for 10 minutes at a time for one white mob to nuke it down with lust, I get it. Fine. For that makes sense. So your runs don't take 14 hours a day. But I mean, to like kite a mob around in circles forever, I don't think that's good play either. Like I think you need some of that check as well. Maybe it's a bit rough right now. Like that could be tuned, but I don't think every mob should just be kiteable.
I agree with you completely. I did some of the bosses, and I like the boss. The favorite one that I have is the one that he's basically a caster, and he summons the extra ads that shoot the balls at you, because it's a soften rage, the same as the buff, but it actually feels like it's important. But I'd wish that they made the soften rage, like the unnatural power, I wish they made it apply slower, and then they gave the bosses more mechanics, because I feel like the bosses are kind of lacking right now.
I totally agree with you. I think the bosses are kind of horse trash right now, a lot of them. Some of them are actually okay, but the problem is you get to them and you two-shot them anyways, right? So then you never get to see them. But a lot of the bosses are just super. Like that blob guy is useless.
I don't even know what he does. But just one of them.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
a lot of the bosses they don't feel like bosses that you've earned your right to fight. They just feel like a free floor right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then when they're not a free floor, I feel like you can't play around it because of that. I actually didn't even think about the kiting thing, so I'm really glad that you brought that up. I don't kite because I'm not a bitch. I usually just actually deal with my problems and fight stuff. But when you do get the unnatural, like let's say you get a boss on your like third, fourth floor, I think can happen sometimes. And if you're playing even like a Demon Hunter tank, you might just get to the point that it stacks up and I just seething, and that's why my hairline is where it is. But yeah, that's a really good point. I do think the bosses could definitely get more mechanics. I definitely, Asmon, I'm going to send you that list and definitely want to blast some of those roguelikes with you because I think that you will see a lot of things that show the potential of what the tower is. But with that, I actually want to talk about dungeons a little bit. Ted, we met for the first time on the MDI.
Oh, it was on Grindr. Okay.
I mean, for the show, we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll send you a message. Check your inbox in a little bit. Meet me at Torghast.
The 69th floor.
69th floor dungeon, by the way.
Yeah.
What do you want to see happen with dungeons when we actually do move on into this new expansion? Because I was very underwhelmed by dungeons personally in BFA, when in Legion I had my own Tower of Torghast, if you know what I mean. I love them so much.
No, I don't know what you mean actually, but hang on, are we talking like M plus or just general dungeon design for leveling?
I'd say aesthetics at this point.
Yeah,
and just like
for
playability.
Aesthetics?
Yeah.
I mean, everything looks great. So the thing with when you first see a dungeon, it's always kind of novelty, in my opinion, a bit, right? It's always like, this is not what we've had for the past 2 years, and as a result, it's cool. And then, give it like a month or two, and you're like, I hate this dungeon. Yeah. I never want to see Siege of Borealis again. But so, I mean, replayability is cool. I think a good, balance of trash and bosses is cool. Man, the 2 dungeons that are available, have you done both of them, Zach and Rich?
So I've only done one of them. I did the Necrotic Wake. I didn't even know that the other one was available until my chat kept spamming me to go inside because I didn't believe it was open. So I haven't done it yet, but I probably do it as soon as I can.
It's very short. It's like 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Legit.
Okay.
You just skip everything if you want in terms of
it's not linear, right?
No, it is.
it is.
Yeah, it's 4 bosses all in a row, but it's one of those dungeons where like all of the trash is right before the first boss, and since it's not M plus, you just weave around it and go pretty much straight to the boss after you've killed the 3 mini dudes.
I saw a bunch of people tweeting. So I actually haven't gotten to do the dungeons yet. I saw a bunch of people tweeting. I'm trying to even think who I saw. I think it was an Alan maybe, but I saw a bunch of people tweeting like non-linear dungeons are really good. So I kind of just assumed one of them was non-linear. But I feel like I might get hate for this. I liked the initial dungeon design of dungeons in BFA. I actually thought the route of the dungeon design itself was really good. I thought you looked at every different dungeon and you were like, this has its flavor. You look at Motherlode and it's like, okay, it's kind of like a trash. Yeah, everybody say wrong. Let me finish my idea. Everybody's like calling me Luigi. Everybody's saying that I'm wrong.
And now they're saying you're molding.
So funny. Your chat is actually pretty funny, dude. But when you look at everything with the dungeons, I actually like the initial dungeon design. Even when you go a little bit more and you're like, oh, okay, this one's the mini boss dungeon. I thought that was really cool. But then you get into Mythic Plus, and you had a bunch of affixes from Legion that made no sense with the dungeon design that you had in BFA. Even though I think they made a decent amount of sense with what you had in Legion, there was just this huge dissonance between the mechanics, and all of a sudden, the affixes really just ruined my life. And I didn't enjoy any of them. And I'm curious about how you felt about that, because you obviously played dungeons much better than I do. You're in them much more than I am as well. I'm usually in the just chatting section, watching different streamers pick up their cats. That was a great clip, by the way. How'd you like the dungeons?
Man, I actually really agree with you, right? Like a lot of the BFA dungeons, just everything aside, like no M plus, no affixes. Like some were great, some were whatever. I think it was just your typical. Are you drinking wine out of a bottle? It was just your typical.
It's 3 p.m. I mean, come on.
BFA.
True. It's just, man, every expansion is the same, right? You have some dungeons that are kind of crap. You have some that are amazing. You have some medium ones, but man, it's just you throw all the Legion overlay of M plus on BFA, and it just like didn't work, and it got really tiresome and boring, and they didn't develop M plus at all. It was actually one of the most disappointing things of my interview with Ian, in my opinion, when I asked him about what their plans for M plus and dungeons were in Shadowlands, and they're like, "Oh, we're generally like pretty happy with it." That just my heart just like sunk, because in my opinion, it's very stale right now. Like, no disrespect to anybody who likes it and likes pushing Radar IO and all that kind of stuff, but I think for the average player, it's become very stale, and they need to just have a revamp on affixes, kiss curse, whatever it may be, and just put some light into it, put some life into it, and then add a lot of incentive. Like, there's no incentive to run, and one of the incentives before for a more casual base, or even somewhere for a hardcore base, was gearing, right, to like kind of chase the carrot. That doesn't exist anymore. So once you run a dungeon, you get your bracers or something. Like, why would you run again? I don't get it, right? So I think it's going to really hurt the dungeon scene and N plus scene if they just continue BFA, which was really just Legion, and continue the same process into Shadowlands and don't change anything, just retune the same affixes. Like, I think it's gonna be really bad.
You know, I'm kind of worried about that happening too. And like, I made the example of like in Toll de Gore, and in a lot of other things in BFA, you have mobs that stand still and perform an uninterruptible ability. And whenever you have something like that happening with Sanguine or something like that, and just Sanguine and Toll de Gore in general, it's not that you can't play around it, because good groups can always get around this, but for an average group, for most players, it creates frustrating situations extremely often. And I feel like it's just annoying. And ultimately, what I worry about them doing with Mythic Plus is them keeping it boring to keep it balanced for the MDI. And that's kind of what I've seen has happened a little bit with Arena. That's why I was worried about that happening too. And then we had corruption, and then that idea went out the window. But still, I mean, I think they need to make sure that the game is entertaining for people that just want to play it and just kind of slam it, and also people that want to do like competitive content. Go ahead.
I've said this several times, and I'll say it every time it comes up. I mean, I'm obviously invested in esports, right? I mean, there's no surprise there. I love them. That's how I even that's how I even ended up on this podcast, right? I would probably not have a job right now if it wasn't for esports, and I want to see all the esports continue to thrive. I love everything that's going on in the MDI, and I love Arena, right? I very much do. The game should never be balanced around those. The rule sets of those tournaments should be where that balance comes from and where that competitive thing comes from. I think the most important thing is creating a really fun game. That's how you get more players to play it, right? And I think one of the really big things with Mythic Dungeons in general, and why it was so exciting, was it tapped into such a huge part of the player base, and that is where the potential is. If Mythic Dungeons are really good, if people are blasting them all the time, more people will watch the MDI, which is better for all the players. It's going to create
it's an ecosystem.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's something that I do want to see do well. And I do think that I'm a little bit nervous for Mythic Dungeons going into this expansion. I actually think that I would agree that that's one of the places where I'm most nervous. Ted, if you had a magic wand, well, if you had a second magic wand, what would you I knew it was coming.
I actually opened my mouth to say it, and then you say it.
I was like, oh man, it's Sloot. I gotta pivot here. I've hung out with you a few too many times. And when I hung out with you, it was actually me who opened my mouth. But that's another story.
Okay.
I will say, if you had a second magic wand that you could use to make any change to Mythic Dungeons, what would you do?
Man, if it was up to me, I would completely I would revamp like entirely the affix structure and the affix philosophy, because right now it's meant to slow you down and just be negative. I would totally go towards like a kiss curse, positive negative affix structure. And number two, I would add like a shit ton of incentivization to it right now, because there is none. Well, and your average
how do you
player,
feel about the mounts? Like, do you feel
exactly right? Yeah. What mounts? There's like one. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. There's no transmog, which was a huge selling point of CMs back in the day, right? Like just amazing looking transmogs. There's no mini pets. There's no mounts. There's no cosmetics. There's like one or two crappy achievements. It's just like your average player wants to earn stuff, and your average player doesn't want to run all day trying to get corruption. And your average player, now that corruption's gone, your average player isn't going to run it for fun for Radar IO score. So why run it? And I think, to me, like one of the most low-hanging fruits for M+, and I've been in that opinion since like Alpha Legion. I talked to Ian about that too, and he's like, let's just see how the system goes. And it's 4 years later. It's just like reward structure, man. There just like is none.
So there's just like no reason really to do them ultimately.
I don't know. I mean, you tell me. Like, is
no,
there?
Yeah, right. I haven't even gotten all my 15s done. There's no reason to go out of my way and do them. Like, what am I going to get out of it? Like a 365? And I don't want to see them bring Titan Forging back to get people to go back in there over and over and over, because that's not fun either. Because like the amount of time you have to invest just for one roll of the dice isn't really that great. I don't know. Like, I kind of agree with you. Like, because it is an infinitely scaling system. So if you put something in the game for that week that made players more powerful and made it easier to clear it, you'd still have players effectively competing against each other. So it's not like some people would be playing with a different rule set. So I'd like to see a lot more, like, there's something like Gladiator for Mythic Plus. I think that'd be really good, because it would keep people engaged longer, and it would give people some sort of lasting reward that they could show, like, hey, I have this thing for doing a lot of Mythic Plus dungeons and I know how to do them. Because like right now, like Raider.io, I mean, it's like a third-party thing. So like a lot of people don't really give a shit about it.
Well, sadly, even when the rewards are very lucrative and they're something that you need, when you know, like a new patch comes out, and blasting Mythic Plus is actually a great thing to do to make sure that your character gets geared up. It's the rewards are boring. They're not fun to get because you've been getting the same reward for 2 years. It's like, oh yes, it's my third pair of Harlan's dice, this time plus 5 item levels. Let's go, boys. Let's go. It doesn't feel that good. And I think that there needs to be a complete rework to the reward structure as well. And the question is, like, how crazy do you actually go with it? I mean, Ted, you already mentioned having some things that weren't necessarily just player power, and having some things that are more in the cosmetic area, whether it be mounts and things like that. I think CMs are a great example. What do you think should be derived, though, as far as player power goes from these dungeons over time?
Well, I mean, the philosophy is always, if you can unlimited run these dungeons for loot, they should never be as good as one time a week lockout raid loot. And that's just kind of the philosophy they kept the whole time. And it's probably somewhat the philosophy they're going to keep in Shadowlands, even though there's no, you know, Titan forging and corruption and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, I think they're right in that. I think the idea is that they're going to with the weekly chest. You know, you kind of have one big weekly chest now. At least that's what I understood, right? Where like
everything feeds into it.
Yeah. So like, you know, one of the answers that they kind of shakily gave towards that was, well, the reason to run more dungeons per week is to try and bolster the amount of loot you can choose from in that chest. Okay, that's still you just run one dungeon a week of each type, right? And then you're good to go. So it's still, I feel like they just haven't really put it together properly for M+ yet. I just don't think they're really ready to answer that question for what's going to go down in Shadowlands just yet.
I am curious how you feel about this. I've talked to Asmon about this quite a few times. With some of the stuff that's happened with seasonal dungeons, obviously we have the seasonal affixes, which I think overall have that was the good side of BFA Mythic Dungeons. I think a lot of the seasonal affixes were relatively cool, kept dungeons fresh. Do you think that there could be seasonal overarching rewards that greatly impacted your power throughout the expansion, almost to the point that it would be necessary to step into dungeons to some degree within each season? I've talked about different things like adding some sort of socket, like the Shah sockets, to a piece of gear for one of the seasonal affixes, or getting a powerful enchant that you have to unlock that then you're able to use throughout the entire expansion. But actually getting something big out of each season that's themed along with the season. And you go in, you get it done, and then you might not be repeating it to the same degree, but just having those overarching rewards to at least get people in dungeons for each season.
Well, are they season specific? Like, if you miss season 1, are you just screwed for that enchant?
That was the other thing with that was So the whole idea with that was I do need to say this first. One of the ideas that I had was like actually being able to have more control over selecting affixes. So like if you did have an overarching thing, you would need to have a way to have it throughout the entire expansion.
So you'd be able to go back and do the old seasonal affixes, basically?
Yeah.
I think something like that would be really cool. Personally, I'd like to see more things that are influenced. Like if they're going to just have the gear be as like plain as it is, I'd like to see maybe like if it's a season that has like Rivendreth influence, like let's say it's like, I don't know, like themed off of the first raid, which is like Castle Nathria. Like, what if the different abilities and the different trinkets had some sort of Rivendreth influence on them that made them do some other sort of anima component damage or something like that to make the trinkets and the items more unique for that season? Because I think one of the big problems with Mythic Plus right now is that if you were farming Harlan's loaded dice at the beginning of the expansion, you're still farming Harlan's loaded dice, and it's the exact same item.
Yeah, no, I agree. It gets stale real quick. I think the other thing is also, we were talking about this actually the other day as well. The dungeon kind of structure, right? Because this all started with people going only 8 dungeons at the launch of Shadowlands, and it kind of got me thinking. I would really like a model. I would more like a model where they release maybe only 8 dungeons like they are now, but then are more consistent with new dungeon releases throughout the expansion.
Like Legion?
Yeah, exactly. Like Legion,
great.
maybe even bump it up more, because BFA was definitely pretty skimpy in that regard. I mean, all we got was Mechagon, right?
Mechagon,
which was great.
I love Mechagon. I think it's a great
It was
dungeon,
great,
but it's only one dungeon.
But that's all we got.
You're right.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would help keep things fresh. But I actually really like that idea to kind of keep gear interesting. And as Rich is saying, as you're both saying, just the reason to keep going back in the dungeon. Like I think that's a swell idea, gents. But I don't know.
I want to double down on what you said about affixes, because we talked about this last week as well with Van Ruki. And you mentioned Kiss Curse, which I obviously think there's a lot of potential with. Something that we said, which is even further, and I'm curious about how you feel. Because of the scaling that you have, you can inherently create very difficult scenarios just based off of the scaling. Some of the affixes, one of the things that's cool about affixes is just the general idea of it's going to change the way that you play and keep things fresh, right? There are ways to do that with positive affixes as well. Do you think that there's potential to make affixes all positive and to have the progression and the difficulty come from the actual level of the key that you're doing?
So basically Torghast. Right? Like you're just looking.
I think it's slightly different, but I do think that
I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
But
I think that it's reasonable to make that comparison, though. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you're basically just asking for positive only, and your test is really to make sure that you link up the proper like synergy and player power to be able to defeat that harder dungeon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Am I getting that properly? Yeah. I mean, outside of the ridiculousness of Torghast builds, it's like that's kind of the same idea. I mean, I'm for it. I'm for, honestly. I prefer Chris Curse though, because I think there's more player skill to take advantage of there, and player skill capping, which I think is very lacking in the game for the most part these days. But to me, just anything that isn't taking the same affixes that we've had for 4 years and just retuning them a bit for these new dungeons, I think is a good idea at this point.
Yeah. So somebody said, I forget what Kiss Curse is in chat. So basic idea to it, it's one of the things that was really happening with corruption as well. It's, yes, you get power, but there's a cost tied to it as well. So with corruption,
it's like you do 20% more damage and everybody else does 20% more damage. Like kind of the mobs do. Or it's effectively
like the most simple level.
Like corruption is literally Kiss Curse.
Yeah.
Like that's it.
Yeah, but it's kind of like it's not the best version of it, but
no.
or like imagine bolstering. Like each bolstering stack also makes them, like take extra damage or something like that, or splash damage to a mob around it.
They like explode for like a percentage of their health or something like that.
Yeah, whatever it may be. It's just like random examples. But what do you guys think about? Because I think one thing, and actually Zach just kind of talked about it a bit. I think one thing that they haven't really done at all, and I'm shocked, is your ability to like select keys more and kind of pinpoint the dungeon you want to go to and for the week and level.
I think they just kind of expect people to go into Group Finder and just find somebody with that key, because like nobody wants to invest 40 minutes or something like that into doing one dungeon and then have it re-roll to another dungeon that they don't need. So it's like, realistically, I don't see people kind of re-rolling affix keys or Mythic Plus keys over and over and over. Is that actually the gameplay that Blizzard kind of intended? So I'd like to see more different types of keys. As I said, I thought it would be really cool if, let's say, they had a way for you to go back and do some of the old dungeons with them being Mythic Plus. Like, let's say something from like Warlords of Draenor with like the same type of tuning they did for challenge modes, kind of. And, have that be some kind of a legendary key and like, really, really low chance you get this. And so it creates like cool events and moments. But I think that Mythic Plus, again, it just seems like they're they're so in line with keeping it in this very, very controlled state, so it'll be balanced for the MDI and for the high level players, that I think that it takes a lot of the enjoyment out of the individual players. And I think keys go along with that, because like if you had a key with 7 different affixes and 3 of them are positive and 4 were negative, that would be a really interesting key to run. But it would really kind of be hard for you to say, okay, well, this guy's key with 7 affixes got a 22, but this guy's key with 4 affixes got a 24. And so it's really hard to determine like who's a more skilled player. And I think that's kind of why Blizzard hasn't wanted to do it, which in my opinion is like, it's valid, but I think making the content enjoyable is what the primary goal should be, because for players that are actually even competing inside of those, if the content is enjoyable for people to for people to play, there'll be more people that will innately want to watch it too.
I want to go all the way. I want to be able to craft keys. I have always thought that would be something that's cool. I know that's pretty far down the rabbit hole, but in PoE, I use PoE as an example for it a lot. You have the ability to actually roll your maps, and just doing certain maps becomes a reward because it's so much fun. There are certain things that synergize with different builds really well, and it becomes very fun. I know that some of the concerns that are brought up frequently, which I think are very well founded, is, okay, well, if there's one key that you can craft that's easier, what's going to stop people from just doing that key all the time? Because path of least resistance. And then the other thing is like, what if my class just isn't good at certain keys or isn't good at the easy ones? I think that there is some variety, if you can craft them, that every class should be able to find an area where it does thrive. I think that there will be keys that are easier, but if people enjoy doing them, I think it would just be good to have people in dungeons in general. And I think that if you do have craftable keys, you could have these crazy legendary keys and stuff like that that you would be able to craft that could be very fun, potentially very rewarding. And also, I think that would be a way to actually have professions get back into the fray in a meaningful way.
That's interesting.
Which, I mean, I think professions should actually be able to work on these keys, and you should be able to use the different professions all in all and create an ecosystem around these keys. I think that professions are one of the things.
Make a key harder and then have the difficulty of the key influence the loot.
Yeah, that's what I would want to see.
Yeah.
And with that was one of the things that I was talking about for like my overarching, like, I'm a guy on Ancient Aliens that has no regard for what he's saying at all, just trying to talk about cool shit and what I would really love to see happen and stating it like fact. That was one of the reasons why you could go back to different seasonal affixes, because I was saying that like an inscriptionist actually would put the seasonal affix, let's say, on the dungeon. Blacksmiths would make keys, jewel crafters would put in different affixes. You would have to like actually get more and more sockets on keys. Like I was just like kind of spitballing ideas, just having fun inside of a vacuum and talking about stuff. But yeah, I would love to see actually more control over the dungeons that you do go into, even if it is just kind of a dream scenario.
I think just giving people more control over what they do and the Mythic Pluses that they do and giving more variety to them would make it more interesting, because ultimately doing the same 8, like, or whatever, 10, 9, whatever dungeons, it's going to get boring for anybody halfway through the expansion. So giving people more options to do dungeons and more different ways to do them, I think matters a lot. And if I go back and I look at Legion, why was Mythic Plus, in my opinion, more successful in Legion? Number one is that it was new, and number two, I think that the classes were just in general more fun and more fluid to play in Legion. I don't know about you guys for your classes, but that's generally the way that I felt. And now that we're seeing like the target cap in Mythic Plus, which is kind of something separate, do you think that's going to play any sort of a role in like the way people do dungeons at all, Sloot? Since like you've done a lot of MDI stuff, and like how do you feel about the target cap in general?
I mean, like I don't know, popular and maybe unpopular opinion or whatever. Like I get where they're coming from with creating niches. I think it's interesting, and I think people saw like target cap on a few spells and they assume that literally everything's target capped in the game, when the reality is most of the classes have. There's like three schools of them, right? There's no cap, there's soft cap like I-beam now, and then there's obviously like hard caps like 5 and 8. And a lot of classes just have a mix of these, some more than others. But you know, like warriors, I mean, you know, Zach, like warriors, they have a lot of, for Fury, a lot of 5 capping.
Yep.
But those 5 targets that they're hitting, they hit way harder than most people
You're
for 5, right?
destroying
Like,
those mobs.
yeah, exactly. So they want you to like specialized kind of things and bring the right people for the job. I think it's cool if they pull it off. And from what I've seen in dungeons so far, the 2 that we've seen, it makes sense. You're not having pulls that are 30 mobs at a time. Ultimately you're going to have MDI and people that are pushing keys grab big packs and start complaining about it. But what percentage of players is that really going to be?
Should that change the game?
Exactly. You're really just, so far I've been pulling in the dungeon. I've been trying to be aggressive in some of the dungeons too. I mean, no more than like 8 maybe. Maybe there's like a 10 plus pull, but that's because a bunch of like little shitter mobs come in that have 2 health kind of thing, and they just die anyway. So I don't think it's really been much of a problem, but we'll see. Like, people just complain because, you had something and then it got taken away.
Yeah, I can understand that. I definitely can.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
A lot of the people that complain about it, there's a lot of overlap between the people that complain about it and people that idolize like previous versions of the game. Like, you remember, we had these target caps all the way until Kata.
Yep.
Like, Whirlwind would only hit 4 targets, and there was a glyph that would make it hit 5, and there were many other abilities that did the exact same thing.
It's pretty crazy. I feel like some of the people that are complaining about it they literally have like money on the line, right? Because they're blasting Mythic Plus in the MDI, and then the other players that are complaining about it are actually in my raid group in the LFR. It's the far ends that are complaining. I do think that when you look at what's happening with the actual AoE cap, when I saw it, I got excited. I feel like I was one of the few people who got excited. The reason I got excited was because it was a key indicator that classes aren't going to be homogenized anymore. You can have certain classes that are fantastic at AoE for uncapped scenarios. Then you're going to have other things that are going to be able to pull just more quickly. They're going to be focusing on cleave, and all of the sudden it's going to feel different to play class X and class Y.
You had a really great example of this, which was last week, which was the difference between, if you guys ever leveled up in Classic, you'd know that like if you wanted to do Scarlet Monastery, there were groups that would do all melee and groups that would do all ranged. And so if you wanted to go with a melee cleave group, you wouldn't be killing as many mobs at a time, but you'd have nearly no downtime, and you'd just be killing mob after mob after mob after mob. And if you were in a caster group, you'd have all of the casters mana all the way up and then pull a huge pack of mobs and AoE everything down. And just having those different types of play styles is basically what classes are supposed to be able to do and how they're supposed to be able to work together. And I do agree that like there has been a lot of homogenization whenever every class basically has the same meta, which is pop cooldowns and then apply AoE abilities to all of the mobs, which is kind of boring. And so the problem though, and that's why I think a lot of people are disliking it, is because if you do want to have classes have more type of like unique abilities, you have to make them bad at something. Like a lot of class envy and class identity is that you're very good at one thing, but you're bad at something else. And it's like finding the balance between just making a character absolutely terrible at something and then making it unfun to play versus just having those certain things that character excels at.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think the biggest thing really is jarring right now. You know what I mean? Especially for players that haven't played since back in the day.
Yeah.
You're used to just cleaving everything, and all of a sudden you can't. So your immediate thought is, "This is bad. This is awful. I hate this."
It feels like,
but I do actually, I do agree. Like I think it's just for the greater good kind of thing. But like it had to happen at some point, you know?
Yeah. As long as I have like 1 or 2 abilities, I think it always does feel really cool whenever you're doing like an old dungeon and then you finally get all the mobs together and you just hit 1 ability, you kill everything. Like that's really badass. But I mean, is that a reason to completely change the game and hold back, a certain level of like class design that could make the game better and more interesting? No, I don't think so. So I think there's just a lot of, it's kind of like whenever they nerfed, I'm sure you guys saw this, they nerfed a lot of the buffs that you're able to get from 10% attack power and like intellect or something spell damage to 5%, and people got upset about that. But why would you be mad about that? Because the entire game is being rebalanced around that change. So I think that we'll have to see how the dungeons play out and see if the target cap actually does really serve to be a detriment or something weird, or it actually just works fine.
I really hope that you get in those scenarios as well when certain classes really like to play with another spec, and all of a sudden you're in scenarios where it feels like you feel the strength of playing with someone else.
Warriors playing with a shaman, or like warlocks and shadow priests, something like that.
it's been a while since we felt that way. And also, I think it's a really good thing for the game's ecosystem. Maybe this is a dreamer classic fantasy, but I truly do believe when you have systems like that, all of a sudden you're like, man, I love playing with Oprah Winfrey because I'm a warrior and I need that totem. And all of a sudden, Oprah Winfrey becomes your best friend. You're hitting them up every time when you see them come online. You go, wow, I can do my dungeons again. And it creates friendships. I really think it does create friendships. And that's when you start playing with certain people more. You maybe make a guild with them. And then all of a sudden we start to have some of those experiences that we did have back in the day. Maybe I'm just a dreamer, but Mamma Mia, I think it might be good.
Yeah, I think that's a bit dreaming. I think it's mostly you're just abusing somebody for something so you can get more
Well,
damage.
the idea is that you abuse them and then they can abuse you. And so you abuse each other, it cancels out, everybody has fun. Right. But yeah,
a lot of fun.
I don't know.
I've tried to convince many people that I dated that same thing, but I don't know. But yeah, no, I do think that's how you make friends in WoW, though. I think a lot of the WoW friendships come from pure.
It comes from
abuse.
Necessity, and it's like, hey, I need to play with this guy, and then after you need to play with him enough times, you want to play with him. That's kind of, the ideal situation. But I do think that like things like Mythic Plus, they should try to figure out more ways to get players to actually socialize with each other. And I think they've tried to do this to an extent with like trying to make CC important because it forces groups to communicate. But I don't really know if they've really hit that, like with beguiling, for example.
The problem with CC is it's met with resistance by like some other players, right? That then just get mad that like one of the things that people liked, you mentioned a couple of things for Legion M Plus, Zach, but and actually I don't agree with this fully, but some of the things people liked in Legion M Plus was that you could just round up all of the trash, bring it to the boss, and then just cleave it down with maybe one leg sweep that used to be 5 seconds and is now 3 kind of thing, because they nerfed AoE CC. And in BFA, they tip the scales in the other direction where trash actually matters, and you can't do that, and things will
everything
kill
has
you.
Mechanics.
Right. And I think in some dungeons for sure in BFA they went a bit too far, but I don't think it should go in the direction of Legion either, where you just don't care about like any mechanics on the trash. You just run up to the boss.
I think even more the case than Legion. I mean, you remember? Did you ever do like the challenge modes in Mists of Pandaria and try to go for like the server best times? And you remember whenever you would do Scarlet Halls and you would pull everything. All the way from all the halls and pull it on top of the boss and just AoE everything down in this massive pile and nothing mattered. And the only time that I would like that and think that's good is if there's some degree of like kind of intricacy involved that the player just doesn't naturally see whenever they're watching it. So like if you're trying to watch a bunch of different abilities and pay attention to all of that, but generally that's just what you do by chaining stuns together, which I do agree with you. Like chaining stuns and then just AoEing everything down like their target dummies is also boring too. But I think it's a delicate balance between making sure that the abilities are they're meaningful and they matter inside each of the different trash packs versus making the trash packs as complex as the bosses. And with BFA, I think some of them were a little bit too much, but with Legion, I can definitely see where it went too much in the other direction too.
You're right, Rich.
I'm trying to think though. Like you look at Mythic Plus, and now there needs to be a reward structure for that. You look at Torghast, there needs to be a reward structure for that. You look at PvP, how's the reward structure going to work for that with vendors? As the game gets more complicated, there are more and more ways to get loot, and that's how we ended up with Titan Forging, right? Those are gone, right?
Yes.
Oh my god!
I got bad news for you, Rich.
I got so scared for a second there. Like, yeah, and you got to do your islands, dude. I'm like, oh no. You have all of these places where you need to get gear, and we talked to Venruki about this. I believe we talked to Preach about this as well. It's kind of the question with every single guest. How do you feel the balance should be, Sloot, between do you think that you should have to do every single aspect of the game a little bit? Do you think that you can focus on one and maybe dip your toes in the other ones to get some powerful rewards? Do you think there should be chase pieces behind every single play style of the game? Where do you think a player should be spending their time getting their different rewards, progressing their player power?
I don't I don't think you should be hardcore forced to do an aspect or like an ecosystem of WoW that you don't want to do, but I think that it should have some tangible reward for players that do, to a certain extent, right? Like I shouldn't have to go try to get Gladiator in PvP just to get the best like loot box loot I'm going to get for the chest the next expansion. But I think that's how they try to balance it, right? They make it so that, you know, it's happened in the Torghast interview, and they mentioned this actually. This was one of their philosophies for M Plus in the first place, and it's probably one of the reasons why rewards from there kind of suck. They don't want one source to have everything, right? They don't want like you go in Torghast and you get the best loot and legendaries and cosmetics and titles, and well, you know, obviously artifact powers kind of stuff's gone, but they want like different areas to specialize in different things. So like raiding has some of the best gear, right? And plus supposed to have, you know, repeatable gear. I don't know what they're going to do with that one. Torghast is more like legendary cosmetic focus. So I kind of, I'm in the boat of dipping your toes in different areas to get some of the rewards makes sense to me, but I don't think they should shove it down your throat if you don't want to do it. But I mean, it is like PvE's PvE, man. It's huge, and like it makes sense that people who invest the time and sometimes skill to kind of get into all the different aspects of PvE should be rewarded for that, rather than just being able to stick in one area and get everything there.
I think being able to get 80 to 90% of the way there, if you just want to do one thing, is okay. But doing 100% of the way there, what ends up happening there is that people compare each of the ecosystems to each other. So it's like, is it better for you to do Mythic Plus or raiding? And then if it's better to do Mythic Plus, a lot of people are probably just not going to go out of their way to raid because they can get the same gear from Mythic Plus or better gear. Just, you know, it'll be more efficient use of their time. And you saw a lot of people, for example, like do a lot more arenas at the beginning of BFA because the reward schedule was much higher and you got much more gear from arenas. And I think to a certain extent that's good. But the problem is, like exactly what you said, if people are kind of required to do all of the different things, that does get very cumbersome. And I think that's one of the things that's happened with BFA, for example. And it's like people complain about having chores in the game. And I think the reason why they complain about having chores in the game is that they feel compelled to take part in the weekly reward structure of each of these different ecosystems. So get your Conquest box, get your Mythic Plus box, do your 3 islands, do your raid, and do all of these things all at the same time. And it's just too much. So
and on one character. Like
yes, on one character, right? And your vision too. And I think that that's another big thing is that like BFA and having like in-game progression systems like AK and essences, everything like that, I don't necessarily hate it entirely, but I do think that it should be account-wide because it just seems like, I remember I would always feel this way whenever I would PvP and I would get honorable kills because I was trying to farm for the Bloodthirsty title for 250k honorable kills. I would never want to PvP onto my alt because I'd be spending time that I could be spending on my main working towards that buff and or that achievement. And I remember whenever they made the achievement account-wide, I was so happy because it just opened up all of these different characters that I could play on and do the same thing on. And it was the same as honor levels too at the end of Legion.
Yeah. I have to say, do you think that there's any aspect of the game though that should maybe be shoved down the player's throat to not have a more eloquent way of saying it? Because I do feel like it used to be raiding, right? And to some degree, maybe it still is. Do you think that raiding should be the end all be all?
Like, at what point do you like, where do you draw the line of shoving it down your throat versus, you know, you just feel like the need to have to, I mean, should raiding have the best loot in the game for what you do, right? And like, in my opinion, it makes sense that it should have some of the best loot, but does that mean it's shoved down your throat? I mean, if you don't want to go do it, don't go do it, right?
Yeah. I do want to, I feel like PvP is the one thing where I really do think that like, whether it should have its own ecosystem. It did a really good job of having it in the past, but it had a chase piece usually here and there for PvEers. You didn't need it. You could still have most of your damage. Like you could get 95% of your damage without stepping into PvP. But if you won that last 5%, there was a really good chase piece. And in your free time, you would do arena, and you know, sometimes people had a lot of fun there. There was also usually a chase piece in PvE, whether it be a legendary at certain times, whether it be a trinket that would pop up.
Right.
I just got reminded of a quest that you used to have to do back in the day. It was called Withered Training. I don't know why that popped into my head right now, but I want to get back onto the topic here. There was that chase piece, and it would make you potentially go for it, and maybe even play an aspect of the game that you didn't expect to play. I actually started off as a PvPer. That was the reason I got into the game. My friend was like, dude, you got to play WoW. We're going to do battlegrounds all day. It's going to be so much fun. And eventually, you know, when Arena came out, all of a sudden I started playing Arena. I thought that was what I was going to get really into. And eventually I ended up stepping into raids, and it changed my life. That was really my favorite thing in the game. So I do feel like PvPers should be able to get everything, but I also think raiding being kind of the pinnacle and having chase pieces even for PvP, hopefully just a few of them. But for PvE as a whole, I think having raiding be the end all be all is important.
I think one of the biggest things, whether it's a problem or not, you know, like that's up to whoever you're asking, but one of the biggest things is just because of the way the gaming community's developed, and like, you know, I mean, you and I, like, we've done esports, you a lot more than me, but nonetheless, you know, people are so hardcore about it, and min max, and, you know, top 1% and everything, that people have become very obsessed with getting the best stuff they need to or can get for whatever they're doing, right? So as long as there's a small upgrade that you can get in raid as a PvPer, they're going to want to go do raid. You know, M+ers that just, you know, because it's still a relatively new system, might happen in Torghast too, right? People that are trying to push those top ranks, top floors, top 2%, top 1% are going to want the best gear they can for the job. And if that comes from raiding, it's now turned into like people feeling they have to go raid, and then there's all this spotlight on raiding, and, you know, they don't want to do it. They want to get all the rewards within their thing. So, you know, some people are like, well, too bad, and some people are like, no, I should be able to. I don't want to have to go raid to go do the highest M+ I can, right? So where do you draw the line?
Yeah,
because one of the things that Blizzard's always been against, and I don't blame them, I back it, is what they don't want to do is they don't want to shard their game, right? Shard, not shard. So like the biggest thing is they don't want to have like a tournament realm for raiding and a tournament realm for M+, and have like a talent tree for M+ only, and for raiding, and for PvP,
it's like,
and
allowing
for
players
questing
to self-segregate has been a big problem. I
Yes,
think that's definitely happened a lot. And having the different ecosystems, and then having like the envy between them. So like you have the people that are doing Mythic Plus now, and like their gear sucks compared to people that raid. And so they basically have to raid in order to get as high as they can in Mythic Plus, because the gear in raiding is just simply better. And I think to an extent that's good, but also giving people individual rewards from each different thing that does make sense. Like I remember back in Wrath of the Lich King, there were tons of PvE trinkets, and Kata, there were tons of PvE trinkets and stuff like that you could use in PvP, and I always thought that was completely fine. It made the game more interesting.
So, like, Zach, do you think that each of these ecosystems, like, let's say, okay, Torghast is kind of its own thing right now, but let's say like M+, raiding, and PvP, those are like some of the big three pillars, right? Do you think they should individually have access without reliance on any other ecosystem to the best gear in the game as well?
It's just so hard to say, because it's like, I would say yes, but then what does yes actually look like in game, and how do players interface with yes, and does that make the game better? So on a just logical level, yeah, of course that would make the most sense, but at the same time, it's really hard to balance that. But like, for example, I think if you're at like 2400 rating or something like that, you should have access to gear that's the same quality as Mythic rating gear. But now that we don't have resilience, that makes it really complicated, because then people that are raiders would feel like they need to do 2400 arenas in order to stay competitive. So I think that they might have to add something like that back if they do want to do something like that.
You know how I think they should do it? Instead of having you know, different PvP talents, and have the PvP talents exist, I think that they should have the actual gear have different tier sets that are those PvP talents. So it's actually on gear again. You get them in PvP, and they're active when war mode is on, and they are active when you're in arena. Like maybe you don't go back to resilience.
So the set would unlock the PvP talents.
Yes, and then you would pick the pieces of gear for the talents, and then all of a sudden there are basically tier sets for PvP that is separate gear, chase gear, cool gear that you would want to have that's automatically active in war mode. It's separate PvP gear. It's just an idea, but
well, this is literally what they used to have, you know? I mean, you had the PvP the PvP sets, like Season 3 PvP set, gave you PvP bonuses, and Tier 6 gave you PvE bonuses. So this is completely reasonable to say.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to have that feeling when I get a piece of gear where, you know, you have that wahoo moment where you're very excited that you have it.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you also remember the piece's name. You remember the icon for the piece of gear. You remember the moment you got it, because there are so many pieces right now that are just very watered down. And, you know, I've gotten Harlan's dice 6 times. It's one of the few pieces that I actually remember the name of.
Yeah.
But in Classic, I still remember so many different names of gear. And I think having different power
There's too much gear
tied to pieces of gear. Yeah, there is just too much gear to a certain degree.
Yeah.
And having those big power moments, that's when you remember the pieces of gear. I mean, I remember my Legion legendaries. So
I very much remember getting my 2 best in slot legendaries.
I remember getting my first one,
Oh, dude, I was
which
so
was Pridus.
really.
Dude, mine was too.
I got my
I was-
best in
I was
slot
not
gloves,
happy.
dude. I was honestly like, I hit the lottery in Emerald Nightmare. I
man.
remember I got my 2 best in slot ones out of my first 4. I was so happy. I was actually curious, like, so it's hard to say like where this is going to go, but do you feel like the different ecosystems could kind of feed into each other and actually make the game better overall? Because that's, in my opinion, the ideal of something like the Essence system, where it got people into doing all the different things in the game, but at the same time, it did feel forced for a lot of people. So do you think it's good for the game that people are basically self-segregate?
Man, it's so hard to say, because this like opens up the can of worms of, you know, at what point do you, if ever, fault community, or and at what point do you fault developer, right? Like, if they put something innocently in the game, but then the community needs to hardcore drive themselves and complain that they have to do this, and it's, you know, they have to go Mythic Plus raid now to do Mythic Plus 24, and they have to do this, and like, no, the only way to not have to do it is to never have it. But is that really what you want in a social MMORPG? To completely have segregated ecosystems that never interact in any way? Like, it's, I don't know, it's tough to say. Like, this kind of community thing starts to dip into, like, you know, like LOL Feral Druids, you know, LOL Shadow Priests, and then you still have people who play Feral Druids and Shadow Priests really well, just tearing up the meter sometimes, right? Like,
Yeah.
where does it end? So, like, I don't know. I'm of the opinion that there should be some like cross pollination. I think it's healthy for the game personally, but as long as
too.
even 0.1% of that exists, you're always going to have somebody that says, "Oh well, now I have to
Remember
go do
the
that in order to be competitive."
Remember the people with the legendary cloaks back in Mists of Pandaria, and they would refuse to do the new BGs to
Yeah.
get the legendary cloak? Like, that's insane. Like, what is wrong with a person like that? And I don't think that Blizzard should. Yeah, I mean, like, you guys probably might not remember. Back in the day, there was a part of the legendary questline in Mists of Pandaria that required you to get 2 wins in Temple of Kotmogu and what was it, Silver Shard Mines or Deep One Gorge, something like that. Regardless,
Took like 4 minutes.
yeah, and it's like sometimes you lose. But you know what? If you queue it for 3 hours, you're going to win one. Like, it's a really, really high chance you're going to win one. Even if you're AFK, your team will eventually carry you to victory. And there are so many people that just refused to do it. They were like, you know what? I will not do PvP. Blizzard is making me do it. I'm going on strike. And it's like, man, like, please just relax. And I don't know, like, I say that, but my mom has literally said that she was on strike because she doesn't want to do Pathfinder again. She's so tired of doing Pathfinder. She's just like done playing the game for a while. So
But that's going away, no?
the new one I don't
Shadowlands.
think is. Actually, that's an
Oh, 'cause it's
interesting
the new
question.
player experience.
Yeah. How do you
I don't know
feel?
if that's.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
I think it's good that they did that, because if they didn't, then nobody would go back and do the other 2. That's what I was kind of
Yeah, I
worried about.
totally agree.
I thought about that before. How do you feel about flying in the game? Do you think they should just keep the Pathfinder or change it up? I think they should change it up personally.
I think okay. I'll answer this generically, right?
Okay.
Because I'm not really very heavily opinionated on how you unlock flying.
Yeah.
But I am a fan of no flying at the beginning of the expansion. I think the zones are, like we were just talking about Revendreth and Bastion and all this stuff. I think it's great. I think it's awesome. I think it really makes you experience the zones rather just bounce from point A to point B. How you would obtain flying, whether it be Pathfinder, I'm curious to see what you suggest, Zach. That's a different story. But I also feel like they wait too long, like past the marination point to give you flying. They wait 12 months halfway through the expansion. Flying should be available at the first major patch 6 months in.
So like
end of story.
9.1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because like by that point, you've seen the zones, you've appreciated it, and I'm sick of it at that point. I don't want to
Yeah.
wait till 9.2.
I agree. I honestly, at this time around, I think that Blizzard should just, like, whenever 9.1 comes out, tell everybody to press spacebar with their mount, and everybody just flies. Just let everybody fly for like maybe like 10,000 gold or 20,000 gold for like a bit of a gold
Off the bat.
Yeah, just let them all fly.
Well, I actually, okay, so I'm an anti-flyer. In usually that's where I stand for multiple reasons. Don't really need to go into it, but I do think with this expansion in particular, I think that there is a unique opportunity to have flying be cool. I think that we could give everybody wings this time around with everything that's going on with the Covenant backs, and I hope that there is just in that first patch, I hope that there's a cool quest line with the Covenants, and then you get your Covenant wings, and then you can fly. I think that would actually be cool this time around. You know, the Kyrians have their angel wings, you got the bone wings, like all that crap. I actually think that would be pretty cool if they had that storyline.
So each different covenant completing the covenant campaign would unlock flying. If they did that at the very beginning, I would be okay with it, and this is going to probably, trigger some people, but if it was time gated to an extent, right? So it took you like 2 months for all of the quests to be unlocked, and then finally you were able to do it. And that does cause another problem in itself. So I don't know if that's necessarily the solution, but I do like the thematic idea of achieving, the maximum rank inside of your covenant and then being able to fly because of that with like the wings that they give you. Like stylistically, it sounds really cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's neat. I don't know. I gotta disagree with like the immediate flying the moment you zone in. Like, I don't know. These zones are just so good, and there's something fun about just seeing PvP happen randomly out in the world, especially like.
I meant when the patch came out. Not at the beginning. I completely agree.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I misunderstood. I thought you meant the moment the expansion comes out, you can fly. I was like, damn, man.
No.
I was not expecting Zach to say that. What's going on here? I'm down. I mean, like, earning the achievement is, to be honest, most of it you're done anyways, just naturally playing the game by the time 9.1 or whatever X.1 comes out. But like, I'm fine with that too. For me, it's just about let us marinate a bit on land mounts and then give us flying. I don't really personally care how they do it, but I do think it gets a bit annoying, having to either like do it on a second account or whatever again later.
How do you,
should it be like an achievement?
How do you feel like they could make professions more relevant? Because I know that you asked Ian about this, about kind of reducing the amount of loot that happened in the game, and or I don't know if you asked him about that specifically, but he talked about that. And do you feel like professions could be more relevant if there were less items in the game? Because I feel like that's a big reason why professions aren't relevant, is because there's just so many other options of gear out there.
Yeah. I mean, the short answer, yes.
Yeah.
I think. Okay, I'm gonna answer your question about what I hope they do with professions with like a very random little fact about me.
Okay.
I love when there's like a new expansion especially, but sometimes a new zone. I love seeing. This is gonna sound really weird, but I love seeing all the different new types of herbs and ore. And I always want there to be more. And it's super disappointing in an expansion when there's like 2 types of ore. And this one has like 6.
You remember the lightning steel ingots that you're able to make?
Yeah.
That was really cool.
So having these like specialized different types of ore and like, rare, like going to get rare herbs and stuff like that. And then being able to combine that stuff into awesome gear or influence gear in some way, I think is really cool. And back in the days of BC, I would spend hours, man, like hours per day when I used to main rogue, stealthing up to Terran Gorfine's terrace in Black Temple as a rogue and popping Blade Flurry and Adrenaline Rush on my combat rogue and farming for epic gems there and making a shit ton of gold for the time, or just being able to help the guild.
Were you able to do that outside?
No, inside.
Yeah,
like in
that's
BT.
what I was about. So like, yes, I remember that. The different the orcs that would fight each other that only had like 20k health or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember watching a video about that back like 15 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So when I was like 58 years old back then, I used to do that, and it was a lot of fun. So just having that kind of precious commodity to raw mats, which are then turned into professions. And I was a fan of BC model where you'd have like some patterns and whatever drop from bosses, let's say, right?
Yeah.
The thing is, I think they're scared to open the Pandora's box of crafted gear being too good, and I don't think it should be better than like mythic N'Zoth gear, right? Like, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I do think there's like they can explore a really rich, deep profession system in the game. So I'm kind of excited to see where they're going with, like different professions are influencing each other in terms of crafting. And like, did you see like, jewel crafting can influence like what outcome you get in your blacksmithing pants in terms of secondary stat, etc.
I did not see that. That's really cool.
Yeah, so there's like 3 slots, 2 sometimes 3 slots of gear for the crafting professions for leatherworking, blacksmithing, and tailoring. And you can have like, if you put a crit gem, you guarantee that like crit comes out on the piece, things like that.
There's a bunch of cool stuff actually happening with crafting. I think that to go a little bit further though with like where their fear kind of is, because I think that's reasonable, tokens. Like with opening Pandora's box. I think to a certain degree, yeah, maybe. The weird thing is back in the day, you could obviously craft gear and then other people could use it. The good craftable items right now, you have to create for yourself, which is a very different dynamic. And you're not necessarily making stuff for the auction house. And I do think that the economy in the game is just like I want to get my longboy right now, right? Same. And I've made all of my gold by death rolling because there really isn't another way to make gold in the game unless you start balding, become a very popular streamer, stand on a mailbox and beg. That's literally
works great. Let me tell you,
it's how I've seen most people get
amazing.
Their gold. There's literally like you can't. And back in the day, you had people that actually just did their professions and made gold and supported them. I thought that was cool. It was a different aspect of the game. And if you didn't want to do it, you didn't. If you did, you profited because of it, and you could get some big power because of it. But there really aren't many items that you're going to get off the auction house in the way of BOEs for the most part, except at the beginning of the expansion. And then if they add something like corruption, obviously that did open the Pandora's box.
Well,
and I'm curious if
that basically is what it was, is that you did have at that time BOE items that became ridiculously powerful. And it's like, yeah, they're different than professions because you don't, actually go out of your way to create this item. It just kind of happens. But at the same time, it does happen. And with the WoW tokens being such a big part of the game now and being able to buy gold just being a natural part of the game, it does really kind of devalue the idea of being able to save up a lot of gold and actually buy something in terms of that type of progression. I know that like in Classic, for example, if somebody has Lionheart Helm, that's an accomplishment in itself because it's very expensive. And it's the same with Edgemaster's Gauntlets or a number of the other, high quality or high tier BOE items. And now that you just have the WoW token in the game and gold just isn't really acquired in the same way anymore, and you're just getting so much of it, it's really hard to make BOE items actually valuable again.
Dude, I'll never forget. Yeah, go ahead, Sleep.
No, I was just gonna agree. Like, I think the WoW economy is so far gone at this point that there's no way you'll ever return to the days of where like gold really mattered a lot to people.
I don't think it can with the token. If you can
buy unless unless like WoW 2 launches, WoW tokens gone, they relaunch, like completely reset. It's just not gonna happen. So that's why I think it's important that they explore professions not from a gold AH perspective. I'm just watching Rich right now. Not like from a gold AH perspective, but they explore it as like a social dependency thing.
How do you mean that?
Yeah. I mean, like, even the minor example that I just gave that they're trying to implement in the game. Hey, I'm a blacksmith and I want my plate pants to have haste on them. I need to find somebody with jewel crafting to help me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It does make a lot of sense because, like, for example, I thought that it would be really cool if, like, remember whenever we got the Sanguicells and, like, the Breath and Bobs of Bonswambi? If you use maybe twice as much as that and you could actually create a BOE item. And also, like, for example, you'd have times where in order to craft certain things in Classic, you'd need a leather worker to create a pair of, like, a leather chest piece. And then you reinforce that leather chest piece with the blacksmithing items and you create a really good mail or plate chest piece. And I do think that's really cool. I totally agree. Like having their more interplay and like what you said, social dependency with professions would be great.
Yeah. Sloot brings up so many good points though. It's like how do you get past certain things? And this is an example that I'm not necessarily advocating for, but it does come with when things need a reset, you inherently need to take things away from people, which then gets people very angry. You saw it with the AoE cap. Imagine if I think transmog is bad for the game, for example. If you took away transmog, imagine what would happen. Obviously, it could never happen. I know, Zach. I know.
Yeah.
But the thing is like
Zach's gonna pop, man.
It
Everybody
actually,
down.
I do actually agree to an extent. Like if I could go back and just, it's like transmog. It's so nuanced because having a really cool gear does matter a lot, but having visual progression of your character also matters too.
Mm-hmm.
I actually completely agree with you. Like it's cool to make your shit green geared character look awesome, but man, like BC back in the day, I got maybe World, but definitely server first Warglaves, and man, I sat in IF on the bridge in front of the AH for just hours, and I was like, fucking bask in my presence, you measly
people
peasants.
would send you tells and everything,
and there were just tens of people just sitting there looking at these two massive green glaives, and that was really cool. And I think one point that I've made on my streams and stuff recently is I don't think these days that there's enough things that can distinguish you as not necessarily visually, but I mean sometimes skill based, sometimes whatever based, achievement based, as like an impressive player that makes you stand out. Like what is it, like mythic mounts? Everybody gets them within a month, right? They're cool for like a week. There's just those kind of things. Just there's not really anything like that in the game anymore.
I'm trying to think of like what there even was.
Green Warlock Fire.
No, now that's free,
Like,
right?
Okay, now, but I mean back in the day, like
back in the day,
Mage Tower for like a month.
I'd say Mage Tower for a month, and Green Fire before Siege of Orgrimmar I think was impressive. The challenge mode weapons in WoD I think were kind of impressive, but you're right. I mean, you don't really have those things that, like, I think Invincible was the thing for me. I got mine like at the very beginning of Cataclysm. I got super lucky with it, and I ended up getting Invincible. And I remember, dude, people would just come up to me constantly and message me about that. And then I got the Black Proto Drake for like Immortal and everything. And I remember like whenever I finally had the Black Proto Drake, and I would get on it, and everybody would be around me. Everybody would be like, "Oh my god, dude, he got the thing." And even more so before that was something like Ashes of Valar. Like in Burning Crusade, if somebody had Ashes of Valar, you would follow them, screenshot them. It would be like, oh my god.
It's still my favorite mount to date.
I love that mount.
But knowing that somebody got the gear ahead of you made you want to achieve something, be better than a player, join a good guild, try to get there. I wonder if there's ever a world where you can't transmog into the newest set of gear right off the bat, or like something like that.
I think the best solution was what they did with WoD at the beginning. You wouldn't want to transmog off of the gear because it was so fucking awesome. So,
yeah, but there's always going to be like one person that doesn't really like that set, right?
Yeah,
but,
I know.
I guess that's fine.
And like, yeah, like should players do they have the right to not look like idiots if they don't raid and don't do anything? And it's like, I don't know. You know, it's kind of cool to have, you know, to have that visual distinction between somebody that has like really crappy gear versus somebody who doesn't. And, you know, giving people that thing to aspire to. Because, like, you know, I know, like, everybody's talked about back in the day whenever, you know, you saw somebody in full tier 2 or something like that in vanilla WoW, you'd inspect them and look at it and be like, oh my god, that's crazy. But it is really kind of hard to give people that feeling again. And I don't know how to do that. Honestly, I have no idea. Because you do have transmog. Like, how do you do that with transmog? I think that the only thing you can do is prestige rewards. But the problem is that prestige rewards, I think, they're too low. Like the Mythic Plus 15 mount is, for one, it's the same exact mount that we have 3 other versions of in the game, and 2, 15s are pretty easy to do for most people. So the mount doesn't really have like that certain prestige to it that only a few select players on the server have.
I really think that because of that, I've brought this up multiple Allcrafts. I've never said it's a Sloot. Sloot might laugh at me right now, but I really think having spell effects, you know, like the green fire, being rewards in the game would just be such a huge thing, because as Asmon already alluded to, there are so many things. They're just oversaturated. We've had mounts for years.
Too many mounts.
Ashes of Valar already happened. People already have it. Now it's not even that big of a deal. People already have gear sets. Why are our spells not looking cooler over the years? Why are we not able to untap more varieties and choosing what our MTX, if you will, looks like?
Honestly, Luigi, you make a good point. And okay, one thing that I've been thinking about for a while is bring back, and it goes hand in hand with what you just said. Bring back glyphs. I mean, in a different format, make just a shit ton of glyphs, right? That are all just cosmetic. Red consecrate, blue whirl on your whirlwind, whatever it may be, right? And just all cosmetic stuff, and just tons of different ways to obtain them, and you just build a library of them. And then these can be anywhere from, hey, like I did like my first M plus to, hey, I did, like Mythic N'Zoth.
Almost like rank 4 essences.
Almost, right?
Yeah.
So like just that kind of cosmetic, because the glyph system is dog right now, right?
What glyph system?
And people will chase that kind of
Does
thing.
it even exist? I don't even know if you can get glyphs anymore.
There's some for like travel form for druid and things.
Okay.
Like there's like 5 in the game.
Oh yeah, the astral, the glyph
right.
of stars from kids. I'm curious how you feel too, because I do think that covenants. We talked about this at the beginning of the stream. I feel like covenants, you're making a cool decision. It's going to change how your character looks. I want to see more spell effects actually tied to the covenant, even outside of the anime ability, because
No, I agree. Something like pretty cool. But okay, here's the thing that I wanted to mention is, and then spell stuff and like everything we were just talking, all three of us were just talking about. I think one, and this is going to sound a bit elitist of me, but I don't think that there's enough things in the game these days that are rewarded for like an elite few. And I'm not talking about just skill, like, hey, we finished like top 100 N'Zoth kill, or top Raider IO score. I mean, even like achievement hunters like Zach does, or used to do, or is still going to do, whatever it may be. Just people that have invested either a lot of time and skill in the game that have gotten just a crazy achievement. I don't think there's nearly enough of that makes you stand out these days. And when we do get them, it's like once every 2 expansions, like the Mage Tower. Like, when's the next time we're going to...
I like Azeroth's Champion. The getting all rank 4 essences, like those capstone big dick rewards where like if you get this item, it shows that you've done something like pretty substantial. Like there's nobody that has Azeroth's Champion that doesn't play the game at a relatively high level, right? Or like at least take the game seriously. And I do agree with you. I think there should be more things to create that distinction between players. Like you have gladiator mounts. I think gladiator mounts are probably one of the main things that's kept its value throughout the years. Even though the BFA system, I think, maybe devalued it a little bit, but I think also it's just the amount of mounts that are out now. There are so many gladiator mounts, so many mounts, that all of the mounts are just relatively devalued because you don't really see that one armored nether drake in Shatrath or something like that. And I don't know how they can fix that, but I do think they need to go and look at more different types of rewards, like the spell effects, like what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. I think adding, 6 years from now, we're just going to have another 400 mounts, right? So I think they need to start chiseling into a new cosmetic, and I think spell effects is a really big one. And that's why, in a way, not necessarily because of the back stuff specifically for Covenants, but that they're starting to explore different cosmetic types of things. And some of the back things actually look pretty cool. I don't know if you guys have looked through all of them.
Like
tombstones on Revendra or Vanthyr and
the
all
tier
that kind
3
of stuff.
one. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, it looks pretty sick. But it's just exploring that kind of stuff and just not being scared to just make something that's only available for the elite few. I hate this, like, I should be, I pay $15 a month, I should have access. Yeah, like I hate that stuff. Like I should be able to get it too if
it
this
just
guy
doesn't
got it
matter
without doing
at that
the
point.
work.
Like that's the problem, is like if they make something like that, it just doesn't matter. And I'd be okay with people getting a few cool like things. I think everybody should be able to get a few cool things, same as everybody was able to get a Nether Drake back in Burning Crusade. But if you wanted the armor one that looks really, really cool, well, you're going to have to actually really try for that. And I do think that they need to make sure that they're not giving out too many rewards. And I do feel like to a certain extent there are too many rewards. And I think it does devalue the actual like skill-based rewards whenever you have 10 other different versions of a mount. And then the like for example, like the N'Zoth mount is really cool, and it does kind of stand out because it's one of the only other like tentacle jellyfish mounts that's basically you can use it on land. But you still already have the hive mind, you still already have the surf jelly, you still already have like all the other ones too. So it doesn't really just stand out in that same way, whereas like Invincible just stood out. Like if you saw Invincible, it was Invincible. And even with like with like Firelands, even like you look at like the Pureblood Firehawk, the red Phoenix mount, everybody knew what that was. It was very, very flashy, and there was only really one of it. And I do think that's really important, is making sure that you do have those individual mounts and things like that that have visual uniqueness. because that's been a big problem. And this is like kind of like a really weird nuanced thing. But for example, with proto drakes back in Wrath of the Lich King, all of the proto drakes were relatively hard to get, or you had to be extremely lucky. Probably the Time Lost proto drake, you just had to be really, really lucky with finding the guy. Green proto drake, you had to be really lucky with opening the eggs. But all of the other ones came from capstone achievements in the game. And for example, now there is a certain amount of visual prestige with all proto drakes that doesn't exist now with, let's say, the N'Zoth Mindborer mounts, because you have something like the Glory of the Nyloth Raider, which gives 1 Mindborer, and then you also have the Mail Muncher, which is a complete joke to get, and that's also the same exact type of mount. And so I do think that making the mount a different color isn't enough to make it prestigious.
Do you think there's just too many in the game? Like
too many mounts?
Yeah. Like, yeah. Why reward 5 recolors of a mount?
Yes.
Just give 2. Kind of
Absolutely.
Thing. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
And I do think, like Asmon just said, a recolor is just not enough. Like, the mount in and of itself should feel like, at first when you looked at Nether Drakes, it didn't matter what the color was. You knew how the person got it, and that was part of the thing that made it so cool. I mean, obviously, it had a lot going for it because there wasn't that level of saturation as there was before. But now when you just keep piling them on, I really do think that we need spell effects. I think spell effects would be a really great new area to go into. I think having stuff for the elite fuse are a really good thing. The logic that I paid $15 a month to play the game and I should get something is absurd to me. That's like saying that I paid $60 for The Witcher, I should get a save file where it's automatically beaten. It's like the whole point of the game is to try to actually play to beat it and earn stuff. Yeah. I don't understand that logic. And I think the other thing that can actually be explored, and I'm surprised it hasn't been more, is actual like particle effects on gear. If you actually look at the Warlock helmets, challenge mode gear, I mean, there are so many different particle effects that are on gear that aren't just CM gear. Like, you look at the Warlock helm, that the BC one, and then the one that actually came out in Legion.
Tier 6?
You had you jump up and you get the wings. Like, why are there more things like the wings? The Uldar shoulders for rogues, they have the little whippy tentacle boys on them. Things like that, if you could actually unlock them in different ways and apply them onto gear, all of a sudden, that's a whole other line of rewards that aren't saturated. I actually think that they can do more with mount loot as well. The system hasn't really done too much yet, but it is a new type of reward, which I think inherently makes it more exciting because it's not saturated.
With what loot?
The mount loot, the item for the mounts.
Oh, okay, yeah. I got you. Like the run speed and the walk on water stuff.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's boring right now. It doesn't really do anything.
They used to have that. I mean, with the prestige mounts. I mean, you guys remember the hard to get proto drakes were 310 speed. The gladiators, nether drakes were 310 speed, and then they ended up giving it to everyone later on because people would only want to use the 310 speed ones if they had that one because it would just get them around faster. But I do think they should have mounts that have like special abilities. Like, one thing for me is that I do think visual and like this cosmetic progression in the game, it matters a lot for a lot of people. I mean, for me, this is like, it sounds weird, but it's the only thing that still does matter. It's like, because my gear gets replaced every single tier, but I still get to keep my mounts. And every single tier, I can keep building them up. And it's like this ongoing, challenge that I have to just keep getting more of them. And I'd love to see Blizzard make a base level horse or a base level like wolf for the horde, and then allow you to customize that base level mount with different things that you've gotten for beating different challenges in the game. And I think like the best example, like, Sloot, did you ever play the Witcher 3?
Yeah. Kill
the Griffin. You have the Griffin head on the side.
Yeah.
Just like that.
No, yeah, I got you. So like different saddles, different like dongles and trophies. And I think that'd be very cool. I think they also, I mean, with what we're saying, I think they just need to sit down and take a hard look and just, say internally, hey, we need to cut the amount of mounts we dish out in this game by 80%. Like, end of story. To make it feel special. I think cosmetic mount dressing would be like akin to the, like, we need new, it's not just about mounts, we need new sources of cosmetic, and I think spell effects, and that's a good suggestion as well.
Well, the sources should have parity. So for example, in Burning Crusade, whenever you got exalted with the Kerniai or the Makar, you bought 8 different Tau books. So if you had a Tal book, you got it from that one location, or you got it. Well, you get the PvP one too, but basically you got it from that same place. So and like with Nether Drakes, you had 8 different versions of the Nether Drake, but you all got them from the exact same place. And now what they've done is they've taken one mount model, they've recolored it 5 different times, and they put it in 5 different types of rewards. And what that ends up doing is that the harder to get versions don't really matter as much, because you can just get the easier to get versions. And
if
I think there should be like capstone, like for example the frost worms in Wrath of the Lich King. If you had a frost worm, it was because you were either a gladiator or you did ICC, and that's kind of what I'd like to see.
I think the whole logic of just recolors being cool kind of needs to be reworked.
Yeah.
If you remember, was it Wrathful season in Wrath of the Lich King for PvP gear, where you had the honor gear, and then the next set of honor gear was just it was the same set, but just a little bit cooler. And then you get all of the way to the end, where it's the most difficult to achieve PvP set, and it is the same concept. You can clearly look.
They did
at
that
the
throughout the entire thing. Like,
so it was so good.
Yeah.
Why don't mounts work like that sometimes too? I feel like that is one of those things.
Aren't they doing that with covenants, with like the different levels of the mounts?
That was what I was about to say. Is
Yeah.
I feel like covenants, they're starting to move in the right direction already, and this is one of the reasons why I'm excited about Shadowlands. Like, you have the different tiers of cloaks that follow that kind of mindset of, look, it gets more and more interesting, but some of the other ones are inherently cool because they're different. And then you get to the mounts, and maybe they're starting to move in the right direction. Maybe we won't just have a million tints, and if you do have tints, you just unlock all of the tints. I mean, back in the day when you got a raptor,
yes.
you got the tints of the raptor now, right? Like, that's something that we've had for a very long time. I don't mind tints, but tints cannot be the reward.
Tints cannot be a prestige reward, because it just doesn't matter as much.
Yeah.
Like, you have the like, I think that the only example of that's not really the same thing is the red Karaji battle tank. And why is that why do people care about that one? Because it's red. Like, and there was like 4 mounts in the game back then. Yeah, it's completely outdated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I was very upset when they added the Battle Baron into the game. After having like struggling through, to get the War Bear back in the day.
Dude. I sold so many of those. Oh my god. I made so much gold.
I was so hang on, you sold what, the War or the Battle?
The Battle Bear. I got my War Bear on literally the last day. The servers crashed in the middle of my run, and I got it. It was like, I will never forget that day. I was so stressed out. So,
but yeah. It just, I don't know. It goes hand in hand with everything we've been saying. It just cheapens your like achievement, and it feels like it cheapens your time invested into whatever it was to get, that mount or transmog or pet.
Yeah, I think cosmetic rewards, they really need to rethink the way that they put them out there, and they also need to think of new types of cosmetic rewards. Like, right now they're doing the back items instead of cloaks. You have like the backpacks, and now you're going to have the covenant items too. And, you also have just the races in general. The allied races are, pseudo prestige rewards, low tier prestige rewards. But if you did have, like, let's say, an allied race that was really, really, really hard to unlock, I think that would be cool. Like, if you just saw somebody who was playing that race, it would be like, oh my god, like, this guy cleared like Mythic or something like that, or has like a certain like really high arena rating. Like, imagine if you had, if like to unlock the vampire, like the Blood Elf vampire guys, the Salian guys, you had to get like 2,400 in arena or something like that, 2,800 in arena. That would be ridiculous.
What if it was the fawns?
So what?
What if it was the fawns?
The furry
I'd have to play him, man, to let everybody know that I'm better than they are, dude. I'd have to play it. Yeah.
I'd have
whatever it takes.
That's what we all say.
Yeah.
I do think though that's what we were even talking about. This was when Sloot, you were figuring out the stuff with the audio.
Sure.
We started talking about those allied races, and I was bringing up the concern. I was like, wait, are they just going to oversaturate them? And it's just like, okay, you just get 4, you get 6 every single expansion. And I think that allied races can be a really cool reward, and they can feel impactful. They can feel important and be a reward in and of themselves, but I'm scared that they're just going to be like, yeah, you know what, you got the new covenant, and re-roll your character now, you can be that new covenant. I'm a little bit scared of that happening, because once again, it is a nuanced reward system that players could actually go for.
I think with everything, and this ties in what you're saying with allied races ties into mounts, it ties into spell effects if they ever do that, and mount gear if they ever do that, Zach. Like, it's just quality over quantity, right?
Yeah.
Like that's just the biggest thing here, and I think we're with some things like mounts especially, we're way too far gone in the quantity and not the quality department. And I'm worried that like that's their just philosophy with things, is just keep throwing all this new stuff at them. Like, here's 15 allied races, and here's the 20 new mounts per dungeon, and like, you don't want too much of that stuff because it does take away from that prestige. But yeah, I mean, it's just they have to revisit that philosophy. I mean, we'll see what they do, but how many allied races did we have in BFA? 4 or 6?
I think it's I mean, you've got the Mechanomes,
6.
the Magheart Orcs. I mean, do you count those?
Right.
Because those were like pre-patch. I think they were pre-patch. I don't even remember where they came out, but we've had a lot. I know that
6.
for sure. We've had a lot.
Like too many, considering that we had that flip-flop every other expansion. You'd have either 2 new races, right? Like either Horde Alliance race, or you'd have a new class. And now, and like, I appreciate that they found a way with allied races to not have that traditional means to it anymore. But you also don't want to end up at the end of like 10.0 2 expansions from now, and your character select screen with the new character select screen they have is just circles everywhere.
Yeah, it's like a fighting game. There's like 15 different guys you can do it with. Yeah, exactly. I do think they need to make sure they tone down reward structures, and they make sure that the rewards that exist inside of the structures do matter, and they do have that visual prestige. It's something that a lot of people, the thing is that there are a lot of people who are casual in the game, but they still want to be able to work towards something. And I don't think that the amount of people that like actually just want to be able to play the game for fun and just don't really care about rewards at all, I don't think there's really all that many of them. I'm sure there's plenty, but it's not like there is some kind of massive overwhelming majority. At least a lot of the people that I know that have played WoW, they care about working towards something, even if they're not getting it, the first day or something like that. And I think Blizzard's been in a lot of ways like afraid to challenge players to actually spend more time and get better with things. And the ironic thing about that is that the biggest counterexample of that is the Mage Tower. And think about how successful the Mage Tower was. So many people view the Mage Tower as like a massive positive addition to Legion. And that was something that, it was a cosmetic reward. It mattered a lot. And it did get easier over time, but you had to beat the game on that mode. It's like, it was not, you couldn't play on easy mode. You couldn't do anything like that unless you just got better gear.
No. Yeah, you could play on easy mode a month later, but
yeah. Whenever Antorus comes out, yeah, it was great. I did that on another number of my characters. It was amazing. Go ahead.
I would love for them to add a Mage Tower type thing, without being able to outgear it, and like tune your eye level for that one thing. And legit. Hey man, like that. That is a way to say, hey, I got this item, and be like, damn man, that guy's got like the Harambear form and stuff. Yeah, he's big dick. He knows what's up. Rather than like, did this guy do it when it was hard, or did he do it when he had Antorus gear and he just, or not Antorus gear, but like Bis,
Tomb of Sargeras?
Tomb of Sargeras gear kind of thing.
Even with the way that Mage Tower worked, I definitely do agree having some achievements that you can't just eventually outgear and slap later. But even with how Mage Tower worked, I still felt like it was interesting because players were rolling alts and playing the game and having fun, and it was just good content for the artifact weapons. I definitely agree there should be some stuff, but like Mage Tower in and of itself was enough of an undertaking, even when people were outgearing it, that it was better content than we had before, which is just such an optimistic thing to see. It gave people a reason to
level up alts for like the FOMO, right? I mean, you don't want to, because I better get this now or it'll go away forever. And there are certain weapon like not enchants, but like models that, this is the only flail in the game for tanks, so I have to do this. Or, I do want to be like the big, Harambear, whatever it was, bear thing. Like, yeah, it's like I sat through that. I'm terrible at playing a bear tank, but I sat through there face rolling on my character until I finally got it, and I got the bear thing. And that's what it's about.
Yeah. There was a cool aspect to it, too, with how the shit actually worked, where... Yeah. You went in on as somebody who didn't play tank a lot. I know Sloot, you probably slapped the living heck out of it, but I didn't play tank either, and I really had to get used to all of those mechanics, and I felt really rewarded after I got it the first time. And then when I went in again, I was like, I know what to do on this boss, and it was getting used to that type of mastery that you had over that fight. That you then got to bring really a different spec. it was such an interesting dynamic. The Mage Tower really was fantastic. I do want to say though, we have been going for like 2 hours right now.
Let's get the questions.
Usually,
yeah. Well, let's actually we'll talk about talk about some other stuff. But yeah, let's guys. If you do want to tweet us a question or ask us a question, Allcraft, go ahead. If you want to go on Twitter and just use the hashtag Allcraft, and that's the way we basically search through and find the questions that you guys send to us. And so if you have a question or something that you want us to address, go ahead and do that. And I'll go ahead and open up Twitter and just kind of take a look at it in just a couple of minutes here. So I guess like one question that I have is that like if you could ask for like one thing to change or be better about Shadowlands, what do you think it would be like at this state of the alpha?
To be better, I mean, you know, yeah, like let's put the usual, like, you know, they obviously need some Torghast tuning and all that kind of stuff. Like let's throw that out the window. I legit, my two biggest concerns slash just personal irritations, whatever you might want to call them, are, we talked about it already, like the dungeon Mythic Plus structure. What are they going to do with it exactly? I have very deep concerns for the future of M Plus.
Yeah,
and the GCD thing, man. Shit drives me insane because, you know, like the Covenant, it's a hot topic. The AoE cap's a hot topic. You might agree with it, you might not. I think they gave good reasoning that you can, you know, they gave sound reasoning. You'd be like, okay, I get where they're coming from. I either still dislike it, but I get it, whatever it may be, right? But the GCD thing, no matter what they said, like all of their explanations have never really added up to like the resulting GCD locking, you know, like make a skillful decision, blah, blah, blah. I feel none of their reasoning really applies to the game at all. So it's really frustrating that they're just don't want to budge on that. You know, I just recently did all 36 specs for Alpha, right?
Yeah.
And I got to Arcane Mage, and I literally had to sit there pressing 5 GCDs in a row.
What?
Like 6 seconds of game time plus to get rolling to dump my mana.
Oh my
God. It was
God.
insane.
Mages are rough,
my
right?
God.
Like 4 to 5 in a row. It was insane.
Wow.
And I'm like, I don't get the point of this. And then as a tank, you know, I said it in the interview with Ian as well, like as a tank, right? One of the goals was we want you to make the skillful decision of what button to press next. Do I heal something? Do I damage something? Do I support whatever it may be? I get it. But when you're on a paladin tank, for instance, or a bear even, and a warrior for like the first half of BFA, and you're playing high level content and you're about to die, and you're like, I need to heal right now or I'm going to die. And you can't because the game locks you out for another second. You've already made the skillful decision. You've made the high reactive decision, whatever it may be, and then you just die. You're like, this doesn't feel good. There's nothing about that that's good. So I'm really just kind of peeved that they're so reluctant to change it. And I personally don't think they have very good reasons for doing so. And I think a lot of the real reason is masked behind PvP reasons that they refuse to like, express on.
Because of like the Twitch reflexes. I think that's what Ian said is like they don't want to have Twitch reflexes be the determining factor whether somebody's good or not. But I think that it's always going to be like that. And I don't know, like I don't like the GCD change either. Like I made like my tweet about that, and I said that I think the worst part about the GCD change is whenever you have abilities that are supposed to empower other abilities that are on the GCD, and you have to use more than one of them at a time. Like I think using one GCD to apply your cooldowns is okay. But the problem is that you have to use one GCD to, like with the mage thing, you have to do 5. It's like whenever I'm on my arms warrior, I have to do avatar and then sweeping strikes. So I'm out of the game for 3 seconds, you know, just letting my cooldowns, and like it feels shitty because you know your first cooldown is ticking down while you're using your second one. It just sucks.
Like I get it. Like, you know, I'll meet halfway. I get it. You know, a big flash. One of their reasonings was we appreciate when you press a button, you know, aesthetically, and maybe it has an impact. So I get it. You know, you pop like wings on a paladin or something, you know, big juicy 2-minute cooldown. I get that that's on GCD, you know, but do we have to have like the 30 to 45 seconds on GCD as well? Like I shouldn't have Seraphim on GCD as well, you know, like sure.
As a paladin, that might suck. It must suck.
Right.
Because like as a warrior, like both of my active mitigations are off GCD now. So I can play the same.
Oh no, that's not active mitigation. But I'm just saying, like the example you were giving is basically priming 2 to 3 GCDs to get your damage rolling.
Oh right, okay. So with Seraphim,
when you press them. Yeah, so when
that's
you press
the one that gives you like all the crit haste and everything, right?
Exactly. That's right. So it's just I just can't it just doesn't feel good, right? But the thing is, if you approach this to somebody that just started playing the game in BFA, they don't know any better, right? They've never experienced the game before the GCD. So for them, it's like, oh, that's fine. That's whatever. That's just the way World of Warcraft is right now. And I don't know, man. Like, but that's my biggest peeve. I guess that's not really like yeah, go ahead.
My class felt more fluid and more fun to play in Legion whenever it wasn't in the game. Like, ultimately, whatever their ideals are, whatever their vision is, it's not as fun to play. That's all there is to it.
I legit think they just want to slow the game down a bit.
Yeah.
Which I know there's a lot of tinfoil hat. Like, is that, because of esports viewability, MDI, arena, that kind of stuff? Is it just because they're moving in whatever direction with the game? Like, I don't know what it is.
I think one question about it is actually a question that we actually already forgotten here is, what do you think about WoW on console?
I was gonna make that was the question.
Yeah, you saw that one.
Well. Yeah, Sloot, you want to start with that? I'm curious what you think's going on with everything that's been data mined, obviously, and people put on.
Okay, listen, it's not going to console. Not this expansion, at least. Who knows?
You don't think so?
No, I really don't. I think maybe in the future it might. Have you guys played an MMO on a console?
I played Final Fantasy on Xbox 360.
What about you, Zach?
No, I haven't.
Okay, I played Terra on PS4, and it's like it's a different vibe, and it's chill, and you're sitting on the couch, man. But like, you just can't have the same. Like, I get the accessibility; it probably boosts their subs and stuff, but like, there's just so many logistical problems. If you put WoW on PS4 or Xbox, like, you're not gonna be able to swap a UI around and all that kind of crap on WoW on PS4. You're not gonna be able to have weak wars. Like, I will not bring somebody to like Mythic rating.
Dude, I was saying
playing on a
the
friggin'
exact
PS4,
same
man.
thing. Is it
like, no way?
Instead of since they're winding down the Horde and Alliance conflict faction, now they're just gonna replace it with a PC versus console and just add console versus PC. It's the same thing, dude. And they won't want to play with each other. It'll be hilarious. I don't know. Like, I think if they did do it correctly, it would work. But you're right that it's probably going to create a lot of people. I know on Modern Warfare that has like a crossplay, people get so mad. Like, if they get killed in Gulag by somebody who's console player because they have a little bit of aim assist or something like that, and console players have like the the disdain towards PC players, and it will create problems like that for sure.
Yeah, I will say, like, the only reason that I enjoyed playing Final Fantasy on console was because back then you really couldn't play multiple MMORPGs on one computer because it would melt it. So I was able to play 2 MMORPGs at the same time, and I would just sit there being the biggest casual in Final Fantasy, and I was just getting double XP.
That explains so much for M+ for me, man.
Dude, I actually sometimes I'm not as bad with it anymore, but I would be in a M+ while being in a dungeon in ESO, while skilling in RuneScape. I would just do all of them at the same time. It just feels so good. Yeah, you got to get carried a little bit, but the progression feels fucking. It's like nothing.
Yeah,
nothing you've ever experienced before.
But either way, I think I really don't think it's coming. I might stand corrected. Who knows? I really don't think it's a thing, at least in any short-term future, because I just think it'll raise a ton of logistical and even, as Asmon pointed out, even social issues potentially.
Yep.
I just don't think it's a can of worms they want to open. I think legit, like, I have some people in my community, I'm sure everybody has in their respective communities here. Like, I've disabled people in my community as well, that were just jumped up at the new accessibility options with this brings out. So, it's just
there are
I think
no
it's just
negatives.
aimed at that. Yeah, I think it's just aimed at that. Like, just let more people enjoy WoW on the PC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I think one of the things as well is, anything that allows more people to play the game is good. When it goes on console, I don't really know how many more people it would allow to play the game because of the things that you mentioned, right? Like, who are they going to be able to play with? Are you really going to be able to experience WoW? And PCs have become a lot more accessible, but if somebody wants to play with a controller while playing WoW, by all means, like, you have the ability to switch if you want to just like, I play when I'm not really serious about the game, I play on the ultra wide monitor. and it's like it's pointless. It makes me worse at the game. It takes probably 8 minutes to go from looking at my character to looking at my backpack.
Why does it make you worse at the game? Oh, just because your eyes need to scan so much more area?
Yeah, like I usually play with it relatively tiny. Like it just messes up the UI. It doesn't actually add anything for me, but it feels awesome. Like it feels really cool. I'm like, holy shit, I'm fucking here. So like I won't act when I'm like in a raid, I'm not gonna go ultra wide, but when I'm just relaxing, I go ultra wide. If somebody wants to have one hand on their joystick and their other hand on the controller joystick while they play the game, by all means, like sure, have fun. But when you get to raid, plug in the keyboard and plug in your mouse.
Yeah, play the game the right way. Yeah, I think that's definitely probably true. Another question here about how about decreasing raid difficulty to where weakers aren't as necessary? I think that really making the bosses telegraph their spells better and making it easier for players to be able to visually discern what's happening inside of the boss fights is really important. Like one of the things that I really hate about the game sometimes is whenever you have friendly spell effects that obscure mechanics in the boss fight. Like,
isn't that sorry, Zach? Isn't that one of the things that they're changing?
Yes.
Their graphics right now.
Yes,
Yeah, that's right.
They are changing that, and I'm really curious to see like what that change is going to be like. So like Remorseless Winter is one of the worst ones, and like like with Ravager, if you put Ravager down, you see all the spinny, swirly red stuff, but nobody else does. Everybody else just sees the axe, and that's the kind of stuff that I think is going to make the boss fights easier. And then also using like the boss's energy bar to denote different abilities that they're going to do, and giving people more cues as to the way that the boss fights are going to work, rather than expecting them to use weak auras or something like that. I do think that the boss fights do have, like, one thing I don't like about them too is things like Star Augur. I mean, Star Augur is one of my favorite fights, but the Grand Trine mechanic was really frustrating to progress on because one person would have the ability to ruin your entire raid or your entire pull. And
was it Sloot who said it, or was it Bellular who said who was talking about like I feel like more difficulty needs to come from the classes? It was Bellular.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if I actually thought it was Sloot for a second. I don't know why. But yeah, I thought Bellular had a really good point then. I thought that was just a really good point in general. The idea of like you should feel very rewarded with your class, and when you come into a lot of the boss fights, maybe they should be a little bit easier to master. When you look at some of the mechanics, I thought overall rating was pretty good throughout the entirety of this expansion. But when you look at a fight like Ashara, for example, that fight is so I actually watching that fight was enjoyable. Like watching it was great. Playing it, it was designed for robots. It's like, okay, yeah, we're just gonna line of sight everything, not play our class at all. Yeah, I don't know. It was weird. I mean, it's almost I don't know. It was just weird.
Yeah, I don't know. So, what do you think? Do you think the boss fights are too hard now, or is it okay?
I don't know, man. I think we go back to feeling here. I think it's appropriate to have fights that. I mean, you know, you gave the example of what Star Augur. Man, these days, like a lot of the fights, like mid to high difficulty, are just tough. Like it's literally one person dies, it's over kind of thing. Whether it's because it wipes the raid entirely, or because I don't know, like you just can't make a DPS check or a healing check with somebody dead. Like I think it's fine to have that, but I do agree. Like a lot of the core
Thank you very much,
class
Shane.
gameplay, which was kind of not great in BFA, to put it lightly, would certainly make things better. But with the difficulties that we have, I think it's okay to have a mode that is just ultra challenging, right? Like that's the point of it. These are supposed to be the best of the best, and some of the mechanics can be frustrating. And I think they need to do a better job illustrating them on their part, like the Grand Trine mechanic that, like, you know, the spell effect going up early or exactly what area stand in, blah, blah, blah. Man, oftentimes, guys, like people point the fingers at weak auras, and there's been bullshitty things with weak auras, but for 98% of the things weak auras are used for are to better relay information that the Blizzard stock UI is really shit at doing.
That's right. That's exactly what I was saying about the bosses.
Like I need to skill shot
better.
Yeah, I need to skill shot, you know, like shield block on a warrior. I can't look at 40 different like squares in the top right of my screen while I'm trying to dodge fire on the ground and shit. I need that better in front of me. I need to know that I have a dot on me on the boss. I need to know, like, some of these are like second to second sensitive things that I need to make sure, otherwise you die. So it's not about cheesing mechanics with weak ores. It's about making information more just visible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that there are some fights that, in my opinion, are like mechanically overwhelming, like something like Ashara or a few other fights. Yeah, maybe too much, but the only things I don't really like is whenever one raid member can fuck everything else up. Like, I hate that. It's really annoying.
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating, but man, like other MMOs, Final Fantasy is the same way. Like their ultimate, their hardest fights are literally one person messes up and it's over, and that's just part of where the team difficulty comes in, right? Same thing with M+.
You're right.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I think it's probably a matter of like frustration and like what degree of frustration is healthy for a player and like a team, and what degree is just not healthy. So
Zach, it sounds to me like maybe you need to play with some better people. Shit out of you when you play.
I get kind of upset sometimes, but sometimes I'm the guy that messes up, so I'm not gonna say too much about that. What do you think about multiple difficulties, though? This is another question, and I guess we didn't really have a chance to talk about this, but I feel like multiple difficulties in BFA have given us like so much power growth that we have to have a stat squish every expansion now. Like, what do you think?
I think 4's too many.
Okay,
I think for me, I think LFR doesn't belong really in the game. I think normal should be the lowest we get. I'm fine with like up to 3. I think 4's too many. Yeah, I don't know. I'd be good if like LFR went away and normal maybe became slightly easier to compensate.
Like
that's
Max
totally
10.
fine with me. Yeah.
I totally agree.
And that's kind of, I don't need like a long-winded answer. That's just kind of where I stand. I think get rid of LFR, make normal a bit easier than it already is. Don't hand me downs for rating just because people like don't want to put a group together or can't put a group together for normal, which is kind of a joke for a lot of people, especially if they were to tune it down.
Like there's no excuse.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I'd like to see 2 difficulties with some activatable hard modes, like Cold War hard modes or something like that, or some sort of way to trigger them. I remember like the most recent one they did. You remember back in Terrace of the Endless Spring, the Protectors of the Endless, where if you killed the melee
elite
guy,
version of that.
Yeah, that was awesome. And we haven't had anything like that since then, as far as I know of. And what a disappointment. I love that.
No, we haven't. Yeah, it would be cool.
I saw this one question. I kind of want to hear what you guys have to say.
Okay.
It's a pretty crazy one. This is the craziest one that I've seen. Sometimes I have ideas like this when I'm on a little bit of, I don't know, like a sugar rush, you know, eat a little bit too many sweets and my mind goes all over the place, kind of like somebody else who was in the stream a little while ago. I know that he experiences that problem often on stream, but this question reads, would you want to see a 4th talent spec for all of the core classes? Example, Geomancer, Shaman Tank, Chronomancer, Healer, Mage, Bard, Healer, Rogue.
That was an idea Blizzard had.
What do you guys think about something like that? I personally
Bard,
feel like
Healer, Rogue. That would be really cool.
All of that stuff is there are some like really cool ideas within this, but I feel like the main reason that I'm a little bit dubious about something like this is like he says Dragon Sworn Warrior, DPS Paladin, Necromancer, Warlock.
Yeah,
it's cool shit. But the problem is the specs right now probably need a little bit more work, right?
The thing is, like, from like a fantasy cool shit perspective, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Some of these sound great. But as long as you have like Enhancement Shaman and Feral Druid the way they are right now in the game, I think we need to like
36 specs before we go to 50.
Exactly. I think we need to like chill with like adding new shit until we fix the current.
Dude, I feel like we have a better chance of that Swolken character model being the melee DPS druid form than Feral Druids working in this expansion.
That's actually a good idea.
I love the idea that Feral Druids exist in the game the way that they currently do. Moonkins get an alternate talent specialization within their current talent tree that allows them to be a better melee DPS than Feral Druids currently are. Feral Druids still exist just so weirdos can play Feral Druid and complain about it. We keep all the hipsters on the Feral Kitties, and we just know where they are. We know where they're at all times. I think that's a really powerful tool that Blizzard could continue to use. I think that there should always be, just like there always needs to be a Lich King, there must always be a shit
Apparently
spec.
not, by the way. I don't know whatever happened with that, but I think the Scourge invasion that was supposed to wipe out Azeroth is just going to be a pre-patch event. So it's a little bit disappointing.
I think he's right. Yeah, I think we're just gonna have Scourge Invasion V2 for pre-patch stuff.
Yeah, I mean it'll be cool, I guess, but you know, I do hope that they explore the idea of, you know, the Scourge going loose like throughout Shadowlands, because like, you know, for me, like that's like core game, you know, is that the like Scarlet Crusade, Scourge, all that kind of stuff. Like, so I do hope they do that. But yeah, like having another spec and everything would be really cool. I always thought the idea of like having ascended specs, so like giving priests a bishop and a cultist and, you know, things like that, and, you know, warriors could be gladiators or things like that. That would be great. And, you know, obviously I'm getting inspiration from PoE whenever I say that, but I do think they should make sure that they have at least one expansion where they get classes in the place that they want them to be in, and hopefully BFA will be that expansion, and then you can look at trying to build on beyond that.
Shadowlands. We already missed. We already missed that opportunity in BFA.
Let's get out of here,
look, man. This time it's gonna be different, okay? This time it's gonna be different.
It's gonna be different. We trust.
Yeah.
They keep hurting us, but we always come back, and we always believe.
Oh man.
I really like this one. We are gonna need to wrap here though, because we've been going for a while.
Let's do 2 more.
This says, is there a better solution for bad server populations than sharding? What could they do to bring back the feel of server communities?
Here's what they do.
We've seen this recently.
So I think this is what they should do. They should re-implement battle groups, and they should make the battle groups the same as we used to have back in the day with PvP and like BGs, but have the battle groups be super servers, and then take some of the really, really dead servers and then make them just merge the servers. And just like, if the biggest problem with that is naming, just give the person who's had the name the longest seniority, and that's it. I mean, it seems like a pretty easy solution to me. And I do think having dead servers is really bad for the game, because like in Classic, for example, that's something that's happened with Classic, and now it's not as bad because you have so much cross-realm content. But just being on a server without anyone on it, I feel like it must be a very hollow experience.
That naming solution is so terrible, dude. Imagine if you didn't get Asmongold because some Spurg had on a server the name longer than you.
He wouldn't have.
How would you feel?
I have the original name. Like, but hypothetically, hypothethetically?
Hypothetically, yeah, sure. It's the most creative name ever. There's no one else named Asmongold.
Unironically, there's not. Like, I was the only one. Like, I actually was. But
that's not his point.
Yeah, okay, yes. That's what I'm saying. Hypothetically, I would be very, very, very upset. It would upset me a lot.
Don't you think that somebody else could maybe experience that, and then like the answer is like, well, they had it first. You're not really that creative.
Too bad.
Suck.
Like, what do you mean? Like, you're gonna make the entire game worse because somebody wants to have a name? Like, yeah, it's.
Would you be willing to not be Asmongold to make the game better?
I don't know. Like, how much better would it make the game?
A lot better.
Yeah, I'd do it. I'm already not Asmongold on Classic. I'm Asmon. Some fucking guy took my name. I still don't have my name on Classic. He tried to charge me. There's one guy he's tried to give me, want me to give him $6,000 for it.
You could probably actually screenshot that, report him, get him banned, and get the name. That's against the rules?
I thought about that, and then I was like, I didn't want to deal with it, and I was like, fuck it, dude.
Ain't no snitch.
Yeah,
ain't no snitch.
yeah.
I respect that.
I already
that
had
was a test. I just wanted to make sure you weren't a fucking snitch. What do you guys think about restricting how easy it is to do? I kind of want to like dive into this a little bit more because it's a combination of like the two questions that we had.
That'd be a good last question. Let's go.
Yeah. So what do you think about the restricting of how easy it is to do cross-realm group matchmaking? Like LFR and GF destroyed server communities. Like, do you think that with all of the stuff that's being said, that question was from Leary, do you think that there is a way to maybe go back, take out different things like LFR, change the way the groups are made so it's more focused on servers, maybe bolster servers a little bit more, and have less of a layered feel? Like, do you think that there is a system that could be implemented to make something like that actually work?
I think they should just do battle groups, man. Like, just do battle groups and have mega servers. That's what I'd like to see. But like, also, that sounds great, but the servers can barely stand up as they are right now. I mean, they're already really dysfunctional.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, there's a lot of like social issue with a lot of the layering and stuff. But man, You guys remember BC launch in like Hellfire Peninsula with just the floodgates
so
opening?
Yep.
It was so bad. And Draenor launch, and like, man, there's so many nightmares.
Draenor
and
launch week.
Yeah, and in this expansion, they want to funnel everybody into Bastion. Like, you would not be able to play if they don't have that kind of tech. Is the problem, really?
Yeah.
Short term, at least, right?
Classic, I will say, classic when they turned off the like the layering was there, and then they turned it off. And if yeah, I know they turned it back on. I actually might play classic again now.
No,
but
now you can.
yeah, that's the thing, right? Like with classic, like we already have. This is why classic is so great. Even if you don't care about classic and all you care about is retail WoW, there are things going on in classic which impact the game in a huge way. Having the launch proved that layering makes stuff work, right? The second that layering got turned off, did the servers feel more vibrant? Yes, they did. But ultimately, when you got to the point that
they got too vibrant,
you had a four-hour login, is the game unplayable? And I think a lot of people in the classic community now all of a sudden are maybe coming back. And the question, obviously, a lot of people are complaining too. I mean, we're still talking about the classic community, of course they are. But the thing is I do think that we've seen a lot of this layering stuff just happen recently.
Yeah, and it's definitely been a good solution. But yeah, Blizzard does need to figure out what they can do with the servers, because I'm not a server engineer, but I don't need to be to know that the game is not working. Like it's dysfunctional. Like even in like very, very small areas, like Nazjatar, like Battle for Nazjatar, you just can't play it. It's not playable. And it's like for Ashran was so bad that Blizzard, the way they fixed it was it just turned the maximum amount of players from 40 to 25. That was the solution.
Even weekly reset right now, like if you were to play on live,
dude,
if you were
like if you're doing
like
quests
going into
during the world boss
invasion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my god,
it's rough on like Tuesdays for NA, Wednesdays for EU. Like it's like 5 seconds input lag.
And that needs to be fixed. I mean, that is core gameplay stuff, and I'll be the first to say that I have no idea how to fix it, but something needs to happen.
What Preach said with it was just really, really well said. I mean, we give the affordances to WoW, but imagine a new player going into something like that, and I think that's something that we need to continue to keep our eyes on. I know, Zach, I tuned into your stream and you were lagging a little bit on the alpha. And
even on the alpha, that really gave me a lot of pause, because I thought the stat squish was going to help that a little bit, and I was getting almost like, whenever you fell rish and you get like the half GCD, the entire half GCD would complete, and then the fell rush would occur.
Did you?
I'm worried.
I have the same issue. Did you adjust your custom lag tolerance?
No, I didn't. I don't have it enabled, I think, by default, though.
Actually, I don't think you can in the base UI. But a lot of times when I have had that issue, if I adjust the custom lag tolerance, it fixes it up pretty nicely.
Okay, I might try that then.
I think you can script command it. Because I was having the same thing. I was like, man, I'm just like sitting in like Bloodlust would be popped on the first boss in the new dungeon.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I can't like press my buttons. Legit, I'm just sitting here doing nothing.
Yeah.
And then I fixed that up. I was like, okay, I can play the game again now.
Yeah, like their sharding technology I think is good, but it does feel like the servers have just gotten worse over time. And hopefully, like, I'm assuming that like all of the calculations that Blizzard has to do inside of combat is probably why. But again, I have no idea. I just hope that it really gets fixed, because it's just very, very core to the nature of the game.
Yeah. Guys, Sloot, I want to thank you. It's been this is like a half hour later than we usually go. I want to thank you so much. I feel like we got to talk about a whole bunch of shit. And everybody, if you haven't, definitely check out Sloot's stream. Your schedule is pretty much the same, right? Like every day?
My schedule is just stream till I die.
So all day, right?
Yeah,
pretty much
all day. Literally whenever the fuck you want to watch WoW, Sloot's going to be streaming. Incredible player. And definitely be sure to check him out. We have his Twitter and his Instagram there.
Go ahead and put it in chat, guys. There you go. Thanks, Tyrion.
Yeah, Tyrion's got the Twitter, the Twitch, all of that shit. Tyrion, thank you very much. Guys, definitely check out Sloot's content. And also today, as per usual, we will be doing viewer call-ins. We'll do the after show. It worked really well last week. I don't know if we'll do a raid. That we'll figure that out. But Ted, you're going to stream today as well, right? Like
I'll head off.
Yeah,
when it's,
so-
time
Yeah,
to be
thanks
good.
a lot for coming on, man.
Yeah,
I think this
yeah,
has
thank
been a
No,
great
I appreciate it.
episode.
Sorry about the tech stuff at the beginning.
It's the way it goes. It happens
it's
to
the way
me
it
pretty
goes,
much every
brothers.
day. Yep, I understand. Anyway, man, thank you so much for coming on.
All right, dudes, it's been a pleasure, and I'll see you in Shadowlands.
Yeah, all right, man. I'll talk to you later. Peace.
We'll see you
Later,
then.
guys.
See ya.
Have fun.